Lihan, a young man who fought through 2 lifetimes, battling deadlines while stuck in overtime, graduated from graduate school with sheer determination. Just as he vowed to live a life of freedom, he was hit by a truck and whisked away to another world. He was upgraded to the young master of the Flower Clan, a top magical family in the Empire. Just when he thought life was turning a new page, the family law clearly stated that the youngest son must fend for himself. If he wanted to live, he had to choose his own profession with a heart that had been tormented by deadlines. Lihan chose to become a wizard for stability, and at the Inroga's Academy, he immediately realized he wasn't the cool main character, but just an ordinary student entering a horror movie where the principal was like the final boss. The magical energy was like a storm, and the vanity of his attendance was blown away in the dazzling light and noise. As he stepped into the academy, Lihan could only think about how he couldn't skip class in his past life. In this new life, he was going to school again. Was it his fate to suffer because he was too good at studying? In the bustling hallway, laughter and chatter echoed, and someone called him Ironhead. Another person mentioned he was a contender for the title of Count. Suddenly, a clear voice rang out, "Lihan of the Flower Clan, right?" Hearing his name, Lihan turned around startled and saw a cute girl with orange hair and sparkling blue eyes like autumn lake water. She smiled and greeted him. "I'm Yoner Meekin." Just like the Warden clan, the Meekin clan also descended from wizards. He turned to her and replied, "Nice to meet you, Yoner. What's up?" She pointed ahead and reminded him, "The prince wants to see you." Surprised Lihan wondered, "The prince?" He followed Ioner's finger and saw a friendly young man with shiny blonde hair waving at him. Indeed, this was the perfect place to learn and to build connections. Prince Garlando was smiling widely at Lihan, radiating friendliness. One couldn't help but think, it's only the first day and they're already eager to befriend him. As Lihan looked at the prince, he thought to himself that calling him Your Highness felt a bit excessive, considering the king had over 100 children. Even in the royal family, people only cared about the eldest son, and the king showed no interest in his other children. Thus, they faced even more difficulties surrounded by the offspring of powerful families like this. Although they were of royal descent, they were regarded as inferior to Ioner's Meekin clan. Why was she being so friendly? Lihan pondered, just as she interrupted his thoughts, asking, "Aren't you coming with us?" In the distance, other students were whispering and giggling, mocking why she would help an unknown prince. However, Lihan kept his composure, thinking that being friends was better than having enemies. He stepped forward to shake Garlando's hand, saying, "Of course, what's wrong with making friends?" Hearing this, Ioner smiled brightly and replied, "Really? Thank you. You're the first one to agree." Lihan felt speechless, looking at Ioner and Garlando, chatting happily, while his mind was tangled with thoughts. To elaborate on Garlando, he was the 97th prince, rumored to be the 101st prince. Yet he insisted he was the 97th. Everyone thought he clearly didn't want to be behind the 100th. Moreover, as Lihan was lost in thought, Garlando's voice interrupted him. "Are you listening, Lihan?" Startled, he replied, "Oh, sorry, what did you say?" Garlando suddenly snapped back. "That brat over there rejected my offer. How dare he..." This was truly the behavior of a childish kid. Lihan explained that perhaps he didn't know about his noble background. Garlando looked puzzled, asking, "What does noble background mean?" This made Lihan feel speechless, realizing he was not only childish, but also clueless. Nevertheless, he patiently explained, "Noble background means a very small number of people belong to the prestigious upper class." Upon hearing this, Garlando, the clueless prince, immediately looked pleased. He patted his chest, saying, "Then that fits to describe me." He quickly returned to the previous topic, saying, "Anyway, they rejected my offer and went to talk to Adena." It turned out a crowd of noble students was surrounding another classmate, Rona, who was passionately engaged in conversation. She was Princess Adena, the 44th princess, or somewhere around that. Lihan thought to himself that she had a noble aura, just as expected from a royal family. Naturally, everyone would follow her. Unlike Garlando, who was still excitedly saying, "You should handle her okay. She's tall and looks strong." Hearing this, Lihan calmly replied, "Garlando, those of noble descent don't bully others." Garlando quickly denied, "I didn't say you should bully her," but Lihan interrupted, "They wouldn't do that either. Just think about it," leaving Garlando speechless. However, Lihan still felt a bit unhappy inside. "So what should I do now?" Garlando asked, receiving a generous answer from Lihan. "Forgive them, but if you don't want to, you should challenge them directly." Garlando turned pale, panicking. "What?" He was sweating, trying to act nonchalant, but his voice was still stammering as he said, "We didn't need to make a big deal out of this because he was a noble prince." Lihan gently patted his head, praising him for being good, which caught Ioner's attention. The scene made her step forward and say, "Wow, you're really amazing. You can control his stubbornness, but even I, as a relative, can't handle him." Lihan modestly denied, saying that was a bit too much. Curious, she asked him, "I understand you two are relatives, but why do you bother taking care of him?" She immediately replied, "Because Ioner hasn't finished speaking," when a mystical blue light appeared in the air, transforming into a giant, menacing skull that let out a loud noise. "You guys are having fun chatting, huh?" A student quickly recognized and shouted, "That skull we saw at the gate, turns out it's the principal OSU." He opened his mouth wide, revealing a huge, sparkling gem. Lihan thought to herself that this entity was the result of a sorcerer willing to pay the price for immortality. It was unbelievable that the principal was actually a lich. The principal then asked, "I have a question for all of you. Why do I call you all Ironheads?" Princess Adenas raised her hand and answered, Because the symbol of this class is steel. The principal responded, "Excellent, your house gets 10 points." Hearing this, she happily asked, "So there's a point system for the houses?" The answer from Principal OSU was, "Of course not. If you want to become a sorcerer, the first thing you should learn is how to distinguish between real and fake," making her speechless. He continued, "That's right, the symbol for this class is steel. Steel is a material that can change depending on how it's crafted. A precious material with many uses, a perfect material for new students like you." A student quietly exclaimed in excitement. Little did they know, the principal's next words left everyone stunned. "You've all been tricked." Then the skull let out a gleeful laugh and he casually said, "The reason your symbol is steel is that your heads are empty." Everyone was taken aback, their faces pale and speechless. Li Han thought no matter how he provoked them, everyone was tight-lipped because moving in a place full of magical energy was incredibly difficult. "But now it feels easier, maybe because I'm used to it here," he wondered if it was, thanks to the principal. Suddenly, the principal softened his tone, saying, "I may have been too harsh on you kids who just traveled a long way to get here." Meanwhile, Li Han quietly turned to go somewhere. The principal finished his sentence while focusing on Li Han, wondering how she could move in such a dense place. At that moment, a beam of golden light shone down in front of everyone. Principal OSU continued, All of you look over to the door on the left." The door opened slightly, and light spread throughout the space, revealing a clean and lavish dining room filled with a variety of delicious food. The principal continued, "Enjoy the feast and let go of the fatigue from your journey." Everyone happily rushed in, excitedly responding, "That's right. I'm starving to death." Meanwhile, Li Han still doubted, asking, "Wow, this can't be a joke, right?" As they looked at the slices of white bread slathered with butter and cheese, delicious chicken marinated in butter oil. The spices and flour were cooked with wine to create a gourmet chicken dish, and the baked goods were topped with sauce. There's even fresh fish grilled over charcoal in the European style. Baganando cheerfully said, inviting everyone to enjoy. Then, holding a knife and fork as soon as they touched the plate, everything changed. He asked in confusion, "Where did the food go?" At that moment, the principal's voice rang out, "You fools, you've been tricked again. When will you kids get a little smarter?" Li Han silently stood behind, thinking she heard that when one becomes a lich, they have to trade something. She was sure this principal lacked quite a few things. Her eyes were filled with secret thoughts. Principal OSU continued, "This academy is where sorcerers are born, and the greatest motivation behind a sorcerer growing stronger is the lich." The principal opened his terrifying mouth wide and continued, "That is the desire." Accompanied by countless clothes and food falling to the ground, leaving everyone puzzled, he said, "This is your uniform and food." But the clothes Iona held looked really dull. Gagnando only had a rice bowl and a dry loaf of bread. Gagnando grumbled, "This is way too much." Before he could finish his sentence, Principal OSU interrupted, "Exactly. That's the reaction I wanted to see. The food is terrible, right? Learn magic and find good food for yourself. Aren't the clothes and ones very shabby?" Principal OSU continued, "Learn magic and go find better things for yourself." At the same time, from his eyes and mouth, eerie rays of light emanated. He continued, "This is the rule of this academy." A student whispered to his friend, "What if we go outside and get more stuff?" Principal OSU immediately replied, "Exactly, that's a very good question. First-year students are not allowed to leave here. Asking about the seniors is not allowed, so let's wrap this up. Good luck to you all. Move forward and become the greatest wizards." Hearing these words, Li Han couldn't help but feel disheartened. Is there always a teacher like this in every world? I've encountered so many that it's getting tiresome. But you know that professor's gaze was just like my old teachers from my past life. That wild look in his eyes. Just as I was lost in thought, Garinado hurriedly asked, "Hey, you're planning to go there too, right?" "How dare you treat us like this?" Li Han interrupted. "Wait, what? If that skull is kinder than my old teacher." Garinado pulled out a cake and some clothes for you. "With such terrible food and clothing, how are we supposed to survive?" Li Han replied, "Not only do they provide food, but they also give clothes. This place is definitely much better," causing Garinado to be left speechless. "Li Han, while you're still lost in thought." They aren't very well known among the nobility. Very few people know about them because this family always uses their magical research as a barrier to separate themselves from the bustling outside world. Therefore, there's really nothing to say about them. Aside from the misunderstandings, hearing that, Garinado's face darkened as he thought, even my servants don't dress like this. What kind of life are you living, huh? He patted Li Han on the shoulder, suggesting, "Whenever you have the chance, come over to my place." Li Han was surprised and asked, "Huh? Sure, thanks for the invitation." Li Han then said, "So are you coming back with me now?" Garinado, it turns out, accepts anyone who wants to learn regardless of their background, as long as they have talent. However, to avoid unnecessary conflicts among these difficult young ones, the dormitory has been divided into 4 areas. Corresponding to the students' backgrounds, the first is the Tower of the Proud Azure Dragon, where only the noble descendants of the Azure Dragon can enter. Li Han thought, that's right, only those with dragon blood flowing in their veins. The second is the Tower of the Eternal Fire Phoenix, where only those who have devoted everything to the sacred flame can enter. It's a sacred and pure place reserved for priests and apostles. The third is the Tower of the Thunderous White Tiger, where only those who can unleash their fury and sweep everything away can enter. This is the tower where generations of knights reside, ready to walk both the knight and wizard paths. The fourth is the Tower of the Mysterious Black Tortoise, where only those with endless patience can enter. Here, there are many types of people: commoners, servants, performers, merchants, and even lower-class nobles. Compared to other houses, members of this house are often discriminated against due to their lowly origins. This is most evident among the new students. However, in Li Han's eyes, these students are his friends, the most promising ones. While his friends were staring at him confused, "What are you looking at?" It didn't seem like they were looking down on us, but Li Han was still lost in his thoughts, calculating that he needed to make friends. Without business, there's no wealth, and the core of business is practical experience that needs to be accumulated. A voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. "No matter what you say, I don't understand how they can accept such lowly people here." Everyone turned to look, and it turned out to be a beautiful girl entering with two young men. The one who spoke was one of the two guys, and he continued, "What are you staring at? Is there something wrong?" Seeing this, Li Han quickly approached, thinking, "This guy dares to insult my future business partner." He boldly replied, "The lowly one here is you. When we entered here, didn't we leave everything behind? How could someone as arrogant as you forget this basic fact?" Upon hearing this, everyone around immediately agreed. He's right. He comes from the flower family, doesn't he? Truly worthy of being a great family, leaving the three of them quite flustered as they exchanged puzzled glances. Li Han thought confidently, "The atmosphere around here is much better now. Now I just need to say hello." But before he could finish his bright future thoughts, he heard someone exclaim, "The flower family. Don't be foolish and get too close. His family is dangerous. I've heard that the head of his family is a real dragon." "No one can deny it. I've heard they are descendants of ancient souls." Li Han was completely taken aback, not understanding why. He panicked and asked why he suddenly reacted like that. This made the owner behind him exclaim, "Li Han, who told you to be so famous, Chi? Why are you looking so confused?" The owner asked, "Do I really look that scary?" She replied, "What do you mean I just see a true noble?" Until that moment, Li Han had no idea how famous his family was. Just then, Yanado waved to them from afar, saying, "Li Han, owner, why are you two leaving me, the prince, out here? Come back quick." The owner quickly replied, "I'm sorry." This left Li Han utterly surprised, and he turned to look at the owner softly, asking, "By the way, Ioner, can you tell me everything you were going to say earlier?" She replied, "Well, it's because I spoil her too much." And the owner added, "It's because of her mother." Li Han asked in surprise, "Her mother? You mean Garandos?" The owner suddenly remembered back to when she was little at a magnificent castle during a lavish banquet. A worried voice called out, "Iona, don't run around while there's a banquet." The little Iona mischievously grabbed a cup of water and ran around, then turned back and stuck out her tongue. Suddenly, with a thud, she tripped and spilled the colorful drink all over the skirt of a woman. The little girl looked up in panic, thinking, "Oh no." The outfit of the royal family from the Mage clan was here, and being a child wouldn't excuse her. Unexpectedly, the woman gently lifted the Ionair and comforted her, saying, "Don't worry." That woman was Garando's mother. She softly patted the Ionair and continued, "Everyone makes mistakes sometimes, little one. Are you okay?" This made the little girl's eyes well up with tears from being touched. After the Ionair finished her story, she laughed and asked if such a thing really happened. Then she answered herself, "No, it's because she's super rich." Hearing this, Li Han was immediately stunned, thinking, "I can't believe it. As long as I'm friendly with Garando, she would provide me with a huge allowance. If that's true, maybe I should be friends with her." They unconsciously walked up to a magnificent tower, and Garando exclaimed, "Wow, it's really big." Li Han agreed wholeheartedly. The place was called an academy, but inside there were lakes, forests, and mountains. He thought, then why do we need to move around? Meanwhile, a crowd was gathering in front, and there were murmurs. "I'm sure this path leads to the Bishlong Tower." Someone asked in surprise, and Li Han stepped forward to ask the owner, "What's going on?" She heard him call and turned back to reply, "I'm not sure. Isn't our Chung house in that direction?" Li Han asked, "Then why does everyone look at the scene in front of us?" His heart felt like it stopped, his pupils dilated. He was stunned, thinking, what the heck? They all gazed at the tall but simple castle in front of them. Someone asked in confusion, "What kind of shabby building is that?" Garando complained, "Even the place for the servants is bigger than this. Are they making us live in a place like this?" Li Han thought to himself, "It does seem a bit cramped for this many people." But Garando sighed heavily. "I'm getting more and more disappointed." Suddenly, Li Han stepped into a dark area on the ground, and in an instant he felt the space shift, as if he was pushed into another silent and mysterious realm. He wondered, "What is this?" Everyone around him disappeared. "What is happening? Where am I?" Suddenly, a faint blue light appeared, accompanied by a voice saying, "Welcome, little mage," which left him stunned. The voice then asked, "Where do you want to go?" He stared at the light in front of him for a moment, then suddenly realized, thinking, "Oh, I understand what's going on." The Chung House is a magical tower. No wonder it's called a magic academy. He then softly asked, "Where can I go?" A mysterious sound echoed as if responding to him, "You're adapting quickly." Then from the light, a frame appeared showing a room. The voice continued, "Currently, the only places you can go are the private room and the dormitory, reserved for first-year students." Hearing this, Li Han quickly grasped the information and asked, "So that means I can go to other places later, right?" The voice echoed back, "That's right. There are places where you only need to know the name to enter, and there are places where you need to know a bit more information to get in." The glowing spot that turned into a familiar skull is the principal OSU, he continued. But right now you can't enter because the principal has strictly forbidden it. You think to yourself that you understand it's strict, and without any reason, then you say, if that's the case, then take me to the principal's private room. He replied, I understand. Then the streams of light quickly wrapped around your legs like sparkling waves. The last words he said before taking you back to your room were, welcome to the Academy of Magic, young sorcerer. And your whole body glowed brightly and quietly faded away. At that moment, Li Han had immediately arrived at the private room as he wished. He held a book in his hands and read that it was a brief introduction to Irogat, stating that aside from the core classes, there are elective classes you can choose from. You can decide whether to continue studying or not. After trying out for a month, the book had a small note stating that sorcerers are those who explore the principles of the world. Even if others offer to help, sorcerers must walk their own path. You realize and exclaim, so the principal's name is Osugonadantes. After reading, Li Han quietly closed the book, feeling relieved that it wasn't as strict as he thought. Studying here was even easier than going to university. And this room has almost everything he needs. However, in reality, Li Han was the only one who thought that way, because in other places, the students were utterly shocked by their private rooms. Some complained that there was nothing here, while others were still in disbelief. He observed for a while and confidently thought he understood the rules. Why not go see what everyone registered for? Sitting in the lounge, everyone was chatting animatedly, and Iona and Li Han were the same. She said, I want to study alchemy. I've always been interested in it. My dream is to set up my own workshop and supply items to the royal family. Hearing that, Li Han sighed. Sounds like a good deal. Iona, hearing this, was delighted, as if she had found an ally eagerly inviting him, her eyes sparkling. Want to join? This startled him, and he replied, Alchemy isn't an easy job, so let me think about it. He pondered carefully. The alchemy field in this empire is highly competitive, from spreading bad rumors about rivals to monopolizing the materials for potions guilds fighting for profits in the market. Choosing something stable would be better. Iona then asked what topics he liked to study. Li Han pointed at himself and asked back, me. He sighed and thought, I want to study subjects with less competition and easier to score high in. My priority is to become a government official. In other words, someone who works for the imperial government. Even if he focuses on studying a particular field, grades and evaluations are still the most important. He thought this, but chose not to say those words to the girl in front of him. Instead, he told himself subtly that saying it outright would disappoint someone as enthusiastic as her. So Li Han stroked his chin to appear nonchalant and replied to Iona, I plan to try out many subjects before choosing. You shouldn't decide on important matters like this too hastily. Suddenly, Ganando rushed in, exclaiming in a panicked voice, Everyone, there's a problem. His face was filled with confusion as he gasped for breath and said, I think our room has been robbed. There's nothing left. It's completely empty. After hearing this, Iona and Li Han looked speechless. He repeated, Everyone, I just said there's a thief. The two replied in a drawn-out tone, just for formality. The next day, Li Han was reading lines from the book in his hands, grasping the basics of magic. This is one of the core subjects for first-year students, and each department has its own hour of study. He closed the book and continued, But what's wrong with everyone? Because around him, everyone looked bewildered and disheartened, their faces pale, with no sign of life or joy on the first day of school. Iona frowned and replied, We're all starving and the beds are too uncomfortable, so no one can sleep. Ganando added, Not to mention the clothes are prickly, making us feel annoyed. Hearing this, Li Han thought to himself, Is it really that difficult compared to my previous life? He recalled the complaints he had back then. Did you not notice the meal times are in the schedule? The senior gently placed an energy bar in his hand. This is your meal for the day, so you can eat whenever you want. He looked sullen, as if he had nothing more to say. The senior awkwardly turned away and sighed, Don't look at me like that. I have to eat just like you. Then he continued with Li Han. But after we finish our work, there's a whole feast waiting for you. Li Han cheerfully replied, If I have to eat noodles again, I'll eliminate you. Little did he know that his casual remark would actually come true, and he could only lower his head in disappointment while the senior kept comforting him. Hey, this isn't just noodles, it's cup noodles, and you even get a triangular kimbap. Li Han snapped back to reality, happily affirming in his mind that the conditions here were indeed much better, while the other guys were still grimacing in distress. After a while, a group of students, dressed neatly in robes, stood outside a large door, asking each other, This must be our lecture hall, right? A girl softly said to her friend beside her. On the first floor, we were still happy. Suddenly, they stared, wide-eyed mouths agape in amazement. Whoa, what is this? This is definitely our lecture hall. I swear. But inside, a green foot quietly stepped out, and the person had a face just as green. On the first floor, they were suddenly wide-eyed and gaping in astonishment. Whoa, what is this? This is definitely our lecture hall, I swear. But inside, a green foot quietly stepped out, and the person had a face that was just as green. With sharp fangs inside that lecture hall, there was a friendly-looking creature smiling and introducing itself to the students. I am the professor from the academy, and I will teach you about the Trantin. They are fierce creatures, and still dangerous to the nobility, even though they are well protected. The students were extremely panicked, yet there stood a well-dressed Trantin in our lecture hall, warmly welcoming them. I'm glad you all made it. Please feel free to take a seat. That gentle voice continued to resonate, breaking the students' train of thought. She stood at the podium looking down at all the students and softly said, It's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Gashi Kim. I am a half Trantin. I understand why you might be scared, but don't worry. Gaxi smiled, her eyes sparkling, reassuring them, I don't need anyone. She lightly licked her sharp fang, looking quite pleased. Gaxi chuckled softly, adding, unless, of course, I'm extremely hungry. Hearing this, the students turned pale with fear, realizing that if the professor got hungry, she might eat them. Gaxi humorously replied, I feel a bit regretful for joking like that. Anyway, let's get started with our lesson, shall we? She gently opened her palm, and a sparkling light appeared, saying, most of you here have never used magic. That's because magic is something extremely dangerous, and therefore, only adults are allowed to use it. But you all here are the seeds that will grow into mages, who have achieved the rank of iron. This lesson will teach you what magic is, and also help you see if you have a knack for certain types of magic. She continued, the journey to becoming a mage is very strict, and I hope to be your compass. Hearing this, the students sighed in relief, thinking that not all professors here are like the principal. Gakshi smiled and said, all right, let's start with the very basics. So what is magic? A student raised their hand and stood up to answer. It's when a mage uses it to change the external environment according to their will. Upon hearing this, the teacher replied, that's a pretty good answer, but to add on, it's about using the power of mana as the main force to change everything around. Those who have joined this academy have the talent to sense and detect this magical force. But to use magic, we must go further than that. You will have to summon the magic yourself and weave it together delicately. Only then can the magic be cast. Usually people think they need to recite incantations or perform some action to cast magic, but the most important thing is your will. You must not forget that. It seems I've lectured a bit too long. Why don't we try experimenting ourselves? Please stand up now and take out your wands to gather magical energy. Hearing this, Lihan thought, finally, I get to use magic. The teacher gently waved her wand and a shimmering light of pale blue appeared, looking incredibly mystical and beautiful. She demonstrated while continuing to explain, I want you all to imagine the image of light in your minds. At the same time, continue to maintain the current magical energy. Yona silently thought, this is tough. So this is what controlling magical energy is like. It's like trying to hold the reins of a horse that's galloping wildly. It will scatter if I lose focus. The teacher seemed to read the student's thoughts and gently said, while you are concentrating on keeping the energy from dispersing, recite the incantation. Then she recited the incantation, O light. Immediately, a rainbow beam of light appeared in the space, sparkling and spreading throughout, illuminating the area with a magical glow. While the students were still in awe and astonishment, Gaxi continued, the incantation can be anything you think of at that moment, but remember, a short incantation will help you maintain your focus better. Lihan quickly recalled everything she had just said and arranged it in order. Gather magical energy. Transform the magical energy according to your will. Recite an incantation. She thought to herself, I think I've grasped the main point. With her wand raised, streams of light appeared, but the magic didn't happen. Lihan struggled with it, thinking, just because I understand the lesson doesn't mean I can do it. The same was happening with the other students. A girl cried out in pain, and Yoner couldn't control his wand either. Gainando was worse off, only able to scream in fear. Why is it like this? The magical energy is rampaging. The teacher held her wand and gently cast a spell. Blue sparkles quickly fell, and they immediately transformed into a beautiful pair of white angel wings behind Gainando. She continued, if you can't control it, magic can become unstable and harm others, but it's the responsibility of a professor to prevent that. Stay calm and practice. The magical energy is running wild. The teacher waved her wand gently, and the blue sparks quickly fell, transforming into a beautiful pair of white angel wings behind Nando. She continued, if you all can't control it, the magic could become unstable and hurt others. But it's my responsibility as a professor to prevent that, so stay calm and practice. Don't be afraid if any of you still have magical energy. Just try again and see if the second practice goes on. Nando is still crying helplessly. Why shouldn't it be allowed? 1/3 of the students have given up, while the remaining 2/3 are still trying. The teacher smiled softly, thinking that lighting up might be the simplest spell, but it usually takes a whole month of practice to master it. However, this is something the students must overcome on their own, so I won't tell them. But this is something the students must overcome by themselves, so I won't let them know. Then she addressed the whole class again. Once more, let's go. By the 3rd time, half of the students had given up, leaving only half of them. By the 4th time, most had quit with only 3 students still trying. By the 5th time, there was only 1 student left. The 6th time was the same. By the 7th time, suddenly 1 student stood up and raised their hand, saying, "Excuse me, Professor." It turned out to be Lihan. He continued, "I'm sorry for interrupting, but I still need to practice." It seems like I'm the only one left, right? The teacher was startled to realize that. Have we really done this 7 times? Usually by the 5th time, first-year students run out of magical energy, no matter how energetic they are. What you call magical energy is, in the East, there is a tribe that calls it spiritual energy. A scholar who likes to show off calls it elements, and some stubborn stances call it divine power. This energy, along with these names, is just the source of a wizard's power, because every time a spell is cast, magical energy must be used. Of course, a young and inexperienced wizard will experience a phenomenon called lack of magical energy, but in his state, he still seems fine, even though this is the 7th time. The teacher asked again, "What's your name?" He softly replied, "Li Han." And because he introduced himself by name instead of surname, it was a plus in the professor's eyes as she saw a student practicing equality. Garcia thought to herself, "So this is Lai Han," and called him to step forward. "Can you come up here?" As Lai Han approached, she extended her hand and said, "Give me your hand, will you?" He placed his hand in her palm. She was silent for a moment, then immediately stunned. She thought, this is it. Feeling as if she was drifting amidst the waves far offshore, each wave crashing against her more forcefully. She felt her body sinking, gradually losing sensation among the bubbles and sinking deeper into the deep blue water. Suddenly a voice called out, "Professor!" startling her back from that strange feeling. It was Lai Han who noticed Garcia was distracted and asked, "Is something wrong?" No, it's nothing," she quickly replied. "Let's continue with the lesson." Meanwhile, down below, Garlando was still worried about what was happening. He leaned over to Ionair and said, "Aren't we supposed to rescue him? What if she eats him at..." This made her roll her eyes at this foolishness. "Be quiet for a bit," like the teacher said to Lihan. "Lihan, after today's lesson, come talk to me, okay?" He was surprised and replied, "Huh? Yes, ma'am." She turned to the whole class and said, "I'm sure you all have felt it by now. But your magical energy is very easy to deplete, so don't be discouraged. The more you practice, the more magical energy you will have in your hearts, and you will gradually use less energy." She also specifically reminded Gainando that sometimes a highly motivated student might lose control during practice and get hurt, so we should be very careful, right, Gainando? This made him blush with embarrassment as he replied, "Yes, ma'am," Garcia humorously reassured. "And by the way, I don't eat students," causing Gainando to quickly feel embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said with satisfaction. "Today we'll stop here." "You all did great," said the whole class replied in unison. "Thank you, Professor, for this lesson." A moment later at the office, there was a knock on the door. "Excuse me, Professor." It was Lai Han. He walked in and asked, "What's going on? Why did you call me out like this?" Garcia glanced at him and replied, "Actually, the principal informed me about you before today's lesson." Hearing this, Li Han was stunned. That old man, the students didn't know this, but the principal had a very good eye for people. Every year, he provided a lot of information about new students, such as he once advised, "Be careful with that beast student. He could burn our house down several times. Or you might be a half-demon, so be careful when using holy magic near that girl." And what he said about Li Han was that he had the potential to be a complete fool. Garcia thought he meant it literally. But Easterners often say that a fool can also be a talent. What we think is foolish may actually connect to what we consider brilliant, Garcia thought to herself. He means he has seen the potential of this talented person. I wonder what kind of student he will be. "Lian, I have high hopes for you." While Garcia was lost in her thoughts, Lihan, feeling a bit confused, asked, "Professor?" Then she snapped back to reality, realizing she couldn't tell him about that. She looked at him and said, "The reason I called you here is you have too much magical energy." He scratched his head and replied, "Oh, really?" In his heart, he thought it was a good thing, but was that the reason the professor needed to meet him privately? He thought practicing would increase his magical energy. Garcia continued, "It's not just a little bit more. We can't even gauge its limits." Hearing this, he was completely stunned. The total energy of a wizard is one of the determining factors. If there's a lack of magical energy, one would need to use methods to extract magic. To possess more energy means to have more, which means you won't encounter those limits. Lihan felt incredibly happy upon hearing this thinking. That in other words, it symbolizes a great talent. He was lost in joy, telling himself that if what the professor said was true, then his future would be paved with roses. However, that joy didn't last long. The teacher immediately interrupted him, lamenting, "What a pity!" He asked in confusion, "What do you mean, Professor? Isn't having a lot of magical energy a good thing?" She gently replied, "That may be true, but you have too much." She picked up a glass of water to illustrate and said, "Think of magical energy like the water in this glass. If it's this much, it's easy to regulate. However, regulating total energy as vast as the ocean would be very difficult, wouldn't it?" He was shocked, thinking that meant the difficulty of controlling magical energy and the fundamental principles of magic would be extremely high. Realizing this harsh truth about himself, Lihan could only kneel on the ground, holding his head, lamenting his fate in despair. Meanwhile, Garcia smiled gently, turned away, and took something out of the drawer to give to him. She said, "Take this bracelet and wear it on your wrist." Lihan, puzzled, asked, "What is this?" She replied, "It's a bracelet that can absorb magical energy. It will help you." Hearing this, Lihan immediately felt happy again and said, "So, as long as I have this bracelet, everything will be fine. Thank you, Professor." She didn't hesitate to shatter his temporary joy, saying, "If it was such a small issue, why would I call you here?" Lihan was left speechless and asked, "Do you have any advice for me?" Garcia calmly replied, "Using many spells to deplete your magical energy will be very beneficial. You are allowed to practice on your own, as there will be no risk of running out of magical energy." Hearing this, he forced a smile and replied, "Haha, thank you so much, Professor." But in his heart, he whispered to himself, "But I don't need to be treated like that." Stepping outside, he met two of his friends, smiling cheerfully. But inside, he was feeling gloomy, thinking that the future looked too bleak. "From now on, I have to make sure I get high scores. Should I take classes that don't require magic?" Thinking this, he turned to ask, "Hey, have you two thought about signing up for any classes?" Iona replied, "Of course I'm still going for alchemy." "Hey, do you two want to study together?" Hearing this, Nando was surprised and replied, "What are you talking about?" Alchemy is for servants and subordinates. What principles are there to learn, Iona? You're so silly. Hearing that, I clenched my fist and turned to say to Lihan, can you move aside a bit? Lihan turned pale with fear at the sight of her anger and clenched fists. Ioner called out to Ganando, who was blissfully unaware of the storm coming his way, cheerfully replying, huh. Ioner immediately charged at him, ready to give him a beating, warning him that even if he ended up in the infirmary, it wouldn't matter. When will Shin take the medicine that makes you fly away and collapse right there? Lihan knows a bit about fighting, thanks to the lessons all along taught about swordplay, and in his eyes, that punch was a perfect 10. On the way to the basic alchemy class, he turned to Ioner and asked, is he really that strong? She casually replied, just apologize and it'll be fine. Hearing that, he thought to himself that this probably wasn't the first time she had hit him. Meanwhile, she was still fuming with anger, and both of them quickly realized that there were many students from other towers around. He was right, there were indeed a lot of students from the Black Tower. Lihan thought to himself that he didn't really care about their presence, but their gazes made him uneasy. Commoners usually reacted in two ways when encountering nobles. One is fear, and the other is not wanting to get involved, or they might just dislike him. As he walked by, he overheard someone whispering behind him, don't stare. The Flower Clan is here too. The other person hearing this showed no signs of fear, quickly responding, so what in this academy the Flower Clan can do anything? He realized that if he acted too friendly, it could backfire. Before long, they reached an open area. While everyone was busy looking around, a voice rang out, asking if everyone was here. Lihan heard this and turned back, wondering if that was the professor. With a principal like Lich and a semi-naked professor, it wasn't too surprising to see another peculiar professor. However, when they saw the new teacher, everyone couldn't help but be surprised by what was in front of them. Because he was a short man, they thought to themselves, but he was just an ordinary short man. The man calmly spoke, my name is Uregum Junda, but you can just call me Professor Uregum. I bet you're all thinking about how we built such a big building. Then why are we gathering in this empty yard without a single table? A female student with beautiful green hair raised her hand and replied, to feel the mana coming from nature. Understanding the useful powers that alchemists can find in nature. The teacher looked at her with a puzzled expression. Then Uregum casually denied it, which made the girl extremely frustrated. Meanwhile, Ioner turned to Lihan and quietly asked, what do you think? He softly replied, I'm not sure anymore. He then looked towards the teacher and answered aloud, could it be to gather materials? Ioner laughed and replied, no way. But before she could finish, the teacher raised his hand and confirmed, that's right. Hearing this, he was just as surprised. He didn't expect his offhand answer to actually be the correct one. Professor Uregum calmly continued, you're quite a sharp one. You're a smart student. That compliment was directed at Lihan, which made the other girl very uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Lihan was still lost in thought, dismissing the guessing game, thinking, don't feel like you have to compete with me over this. Ioner was still caught up in the euphoric feeling when Professor Uregum said, pay attention. The real reason we need to gather out here is for me to teach you the most important condition in alchemy. You might think that alchemy requires someone to be exceptionally smart and to control magic precisely, but that's far from the truth. The most important ability for alchemists is to gather materials. The teacher confirmed, and hearing this, Ioner, who was focused on writing in her notebook, suddenly stopped looking bewildered. The white-haired girl raised her hand again to voice her opinion. Excuse me, Professor, can't we just grow our own materials or ask others for them? So gathering materials is just a minor skill. Hearing this, the students behind her whispered to each other, hey, the prince is right. Why do we have to buy materials? That's a bit strange. The teacher, hearing this, looked extremely annoyed and said to the girl, you stubborn girl, you don't know anything about the real world? This left her stunned. You can't even gather 10% of the materials you need, and the ones you buy are useless. The reason we travel with explorers is that they dig up those valuable herbs. They dig them up half-heartedly, the teacher said, stamping his foot in frustration, leaving the students bewildered. The teacher cleared his throat and continued, an alchemist should know how to gather their own materials. If you can't gather materials yourself, you can't become a good alchemist. With that, Professor Uregum handed each of them a picture of a certain herb and said, that's enough explanation for now. Now let's practice. Everyone bring that material back to me. En Rogas, all your titles and many unpleasant rumors about, you have one rumor that people die while learning magic. Lihan was sitting there trying to gather information about the plant. The teacher asked us to find out about the herb used to make poison. Ioner, what are you going to do with it? Ioner replied that I used it before registering. You still have doubts in your heart. Clearly magic is very dangerous and accidents can happen. But why bring students to a place like this without preparation? Thinking about the possible dangers, Lihan immediately said that if it's just the two of us, it would be really risky. Ioner nodded in agreement. We really need at least 3 people. Is there anyone from our tower? Lihan suggested, can we contact the princess? That's the girl with white hair who was opposed by the teacher twice before. Hearing that, Ioner quickly dismissed it. Are you serious, the princess? Don't you find her a bit strict? Lihan replied. Well, we just need to find some herbs, right? You pointed at the princess, but it seems we're too late. It looks like she's already formed her team. Turns out the princess had her own group early on. Lihan added that there's someone from the Black Tower too. Even though she avoided me, Iona couldn't help but sigh. The princess is famous even before she registered. She's well known among the royal family for her intelligence and remarkable talent. She has star power that the public loves, and because of that, everyone keeps an eye on her. After some consideration, the two of them thought of their friend Garlando. There's no one else, right? Of course not. Who are you talking about, huh? The ones who formed teams have all left. Silly, they asked each other. Garlando, no one else, right? Of course not. It made you sitting in a corner want to sneeze. Who are you talking about? Li Han observed the surroundings and noted that everyone who formed teams had left. Now only the students from the HQ tower are left. He thought to himself, it's fine if they all hate me. It's too dangerous if it's just the two of us. I need someone who can support the team's weaknesses. Suddenly his eyes caught sight of something. A badge with the symbol of Sagittarius and a name on the belt with short, white hair, full of personality. The owner of those items quickly turned her head, glanced once, and immediately recognized it was her Nulia from the HQ tower. She's a dark elf and a member of the Night Patrol, a patrol force in the north. The patrol consists of skilled hunters and scouts who operate in the north, familiar with the terrain, like the back of their hands. At this moment, Julia was holding a paper, carefully observing the model of the herb. After a while, she confidently said, "It's not hard at all. This is the first time I've heard about this herb, but it's not hard to find." She thought to herself, "This forest is my playground. I was surprised to see so many skilled first-year students, but now it's my stage." Just then, a voice behind her startled Julia. She turned around to find Ioner and Lihan approaching her, greeting her warmly. "Hello, I'm Ioner from the Mackin family. I'm Lihan, nice to meet you." Seeing this, Julia felt a bit suspicious and thought to herself, "That girl is a noble, and who is that guy?" Then she coldly asked, "What do you want?" This made Julia immediately show a look of surprise. She turned around, her tone not friendly at all. "What's your real purpose?" She clenched her fists tightly, thinking angrily, "Nobles are all the same. They call us savages to insult us. Even when we show our best hospitality, they complain that we treat them poorly. How can these guys be any different?" Lihan immediately spoke gently to explain his purpose. "It's really dangerous to go alone. What would you do if a monster appeared?" Julia turned her face away, refusing. I don't need your help." Lihan was very surprised and asked, "Can you tell me why? Don't tell me you think we would use you as bait or abandon you." Hearing Lihan say that, Julia was stunned, her face turning red. She thought to herself, "How does he know?" She hurriedly stammered, "I just want to go alone." Then Lihan waved his hand to interrupt. "But even so, going into the forest alone, I'm sure that's not the reason. You not only don't know what will happen in the forest, but you also have to gather materials and bring them back. Can I go with you guys?" I heard her agree, and Lihan excitedly said, "I knew she was smart, so let's go." It left Ioner standing next to her, feeling completely lost, wondering what the Guadano family was teaching. In the middle of the tranquil forest, a sound suddenly cut through the air. A pair of hands were gripping the branches tightly, moving swiftly. It turned out to be Julia, skillfully and confidently swinging from the branches. There were moments when she gently gained momentum and shot off like she was flying in the blue sky. Watching that scene, Ioner was in awe. She truly was a skilled hunter. "How did you know that?" Lihan quickly answered her question. Her muscles and calves were well developed, and she had calluses on her palms, which meant she often used a bow. Those were things only experienced hunters had. Hearing his words, Julia paused, thinking to herself, "Is that all it takes?" There was something strange about him, as if he could read others' thoughts. Just then, Lihan joked with Ioner, "Just kidding. Look, she has a night watch badge on her belt," which almost made Julia slip on the branch. Then he teased her, "Did you hear that?" causing her to blush and snap back, "No way," while Ioner happily joined in. To keep the same speed, Julia scoffed and asked, "Why?" Lihan calmly explained, "The only one who can identify the herbs here is Ioner. If she faints, we have to do it." Indeed, it was impossible to argue with him. Julia quickly turned to ask Lihan, "But what's your role, huh? You lead the way while I find herbs and you do nothing." Hearing her say that, he hesitated, thinking to himself, "She'll go crazy if I say I'm just here to eat." Then closing his eyes and speaking carelessly, he said, "I'll protect you too." Julia was perched on a high branch, looking down and observing. Then she honestly said, "Looking back now, you seem balanced. Maybe you're from a night family." "Really? Then why are you at the water tower?" Hearing this, Lihan immediately denied it. "Actually, I'm not from a night family. I'm from the water family." He was happily thinking to himself that this was an opportunity to get closer, but he hadn't finished speaking when Julia looked extremely surprised and asked, "What, the water family?" This left Lihan standing there dumbfounded, while Julia awkwardly perched on the branch, muttering to herself, "No, if he comes from the water family, then what?" "Is there a problem with that?" Lihan asked, confused, turning to Ioner and asking, "Is something wrong with my family?" She sighed and patted his shoulder to comfort him. "Most noble families have some not-so-great rumors, but the Wada family is quite extreme." Lihan, puzzled, asked, "What are those rumors?" "The head of the Wada family is a dragon. After the zombie uprising incident, he used his breath to burn all the zombies to ashes. The bloodline of the Wada family made a pact with an ancient spirit. As a result, they gained incredible magical powers at the cost of losing their emotions. The Wada family is not merciful. Those sorcerers from the Wada family were the ones who quelled the uprising. They made a city disappear." Hearing Ioner say that, Lihan was also shocked, scratching his head and responding, "Oh man, that's terrifying. Is it true that if something happens, they'll turn into monsters and wipe everything out?" This idea had deeply rooted itself in people's minds. He sighed in distress and continued, every time a major incident occurs, those sorcerers have to show up right. Why is it only the Wada family? That's too unfair. Iona chuckled, trying to comfort him. You're right. Don't think too much about it. Meanwhile, Nulia watched Li Han sigh and think to herself, I don't know anything else, but it seems the rumor about them losing their emotions is definitely false. She then called out, stop whining, let's get going. Li Han replied sadly, okay. Nulia quickly swung through the treetops while Iona and Li Han leisurely walked on the ground. Suddenly she realized something. Wait, she said, jumping down in front of them. Nulia gently parted the leaves in front of her, signaling, look. She pointed to the footprints on the ground and continued, a pretty large creature passed through here. The footprints are quite faint. So I think it's using its strength to hide its traces. I'm curious about what it could be. It looks quite... While she was talking, she suddenly realized, oh no, I'm bragging again. Iona stood opposite her, showing no interest, but trying to support her, saying, oh, I get it. But Julia replied, no, it's nothing, thinking to herself that she needed to start getting used to this. Besides the villagers, no one is interested in these things. Li Han chimed in from behind excitedly, saying, wow, this is interesting. What can you tell me about these traces? Julia was startled, turning around with a flushed face, slightly incredulous, and asked, is this interesting? Interesting. What can you tell me about these traces? Julia jumped, turning around with a flushed face, a bit in disbelief, and asked, is this really interesting? You asked her back, isn't it interesting? She started to stutter a bit, not exactly, but you're from a pretty amazing family. So in this wild place, you were left dumbfounded, not understanding what was happening. But Nulia gathered all her courage and spoke up loudly, saying that whenever you find any traces like this, it's best to be careful. It's not just about the huge claws. But figuring out what this guy is would be quite difficult. She continued, I've heard about some monsters lurking around the Magic Academy area. Iona replied, oh, I've heard about that too, because Arrogate is a land rich in magical energy. It affects the land and rocks, and many monsters appear, of course. There are also those created from experiments and monsters, formed from discarded potions that resemble special slims. Hearing that, Li Han frowned, feeling really unsafe. Nulia calmly reassured everyone, we will change our plan and follow these traces. This way, we will be less likely to be ambushed. Li Han suddenly asked her, can I learn how to read the traces? This left her stunned. Julia said to you, it's not easy at all. I'm sure you'll give up. But you seemed undeterred, trying to convince her. As long as you teach me, I'll do my best to learn. Nulia thought for a moment, then huffed in agreement with Li Han's request, happily responding, well, let's see how you do. The sun was getting higher, and the three of them were still trying to find the herb. Luckily, they finally found the plant they needed. Iona pulled up 2 herbs, holding them in his hands, saying, it's a bit unfortunate because we only found 2. But I think we can find the rest pretty quickly. She turned to her 2 companions, saying, because I don't see any more nearby. So let's keep going. Suddenly she realized that no one had replied to her and asked Li Han and Nulia, why aren't you 2 saying anything? Before she could finish a sentence, Iona was stunned by the sight before him. A foot with claws was slowly approaching. It turned out to be a huge wild boar, with sharp tusks glaring at the 3 of them with a fierce look. Li Han said, I can sense its magical energy. This is not an ordinary wild boar. Julia also cautiously warned everyone to be careful. This is a huge and fierce monster that is still lumbering toward them. Li Han observed the situation and concluded it would be very dangerous if we stayed like this, since we don't have any weapons. He continued, I'll use my wand because he knew the size of the wand could change according to the owner's will. Immediately, the small wand in Li Han's hand transformed into a large staff. Nulia, standing behind, immediately realized that's right, Li Han comes from a wizard family. And speaking of which, the Empire of Great Wizards, the Huadan family. He must have learned some spells before starting school, right? She asked if everyone felt confident. Li Han hesitated and replied, probably. Julia turned back to remind Li Han, if you fail, grab that red-headed one and run. I'll distract it and lead it away. But Iona, hearing that, was moved, saying she thought too highly of us. Julia coldly replied, that's because I'm the only one who can do that. Okay? Li Han gripped the staff, which was now a large one, saying, thanks, please take care of me when things get out of control. Nulia felt a bit worried. Li Han, what exactly are you planning to use to defeat that wild boar? At that moment, Li Han tightened his grip on the staff, recalling the past when he was around 10 years old. Someone once advised him that a sword could be the king of all weapons, but you must not rely on it. You need to learn how to use other weapons to prepare for all possible situations. Only those who understand this process can channel mana into their weapons. That's called the aura state. The person behind Li Han was practicing, thinking he might be a bit disappointed when he learned the truth. Only a small number of chosen ones can reach this state. Young Li Han gently wiped the sweat from his brow, sighing, thinking to himself, do I really have to go this far, just because of aura? I want to become a wizard and live in the office. He turned back to look at the teacher who was teaching him, saying, sir, I believe that self-training is the way to protect myself. Then, thought that should be enough. He looked at him with emotion, tears welling up, feeling incredibly proud, thinking, our young master is definitely different from the nobles chasing after wild dreams. Then he said, oh, this aura thing, no matter what happens, I will teach you everything about aura in detail, even 100 times the stabbing motion. Wait, he snapped out of his memories, his eyes resolutely fixed on the target in front of him. Adjusting his speed and direction, he swiftly thrust the staff into the mouth of the wild boar, which was baring its teeth. Ioner and Nulia, who had been imagining that Li Han would use some kind of magic, were taken by surprise. Adjusting the speed and direction, he quickly thrust the stick into the mouth of the wild boar, which was baring its teeth and glaring. Ioner and Nulia had been imagining that Li Han would use some kind of magic. Seeing the scene before him, the pig squealed in pain, immediately losing its ability to resist and collapsing to the ground with a loud thud. The two girls were utterly astonished to see him do that. They asked him if he had just stabbed it with a magic wand. And what about magic? The Enroga's staff was indeed very sturdy. It could even be used as a substitute for a wand. However, using it to take down a monstrous pig that had transformed into a beast was no easy feat. The only reason this was possible was that Li Han had unconsciously used mana. Although this was still far from the aura state, he had begun to adapt to being self-sufficient. Ioner was still in shock. Kneeling on the ground, panting heavily, Julia bravely stepped closer to examine the monster. She took Li Han's staff, scrutinized it carefully, and then turned to him saying, "You took it down." Teacher Ioner was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He couldn't stand up and was gasping, lamenting whether the class was really that harsh. It was unbelievable that they could throw a first-year student into a place like this. Suddenly, a series of sounds echoed from afar, and the three of them turned to face that direction. They hadn't even had a moment to feel happy. Li Han sighed and said, "It seems there's another one." Meanwhile, Ioner choked out, "Should I just drop this class?" Which made Julia hurry to advise him not to do that. As they got closer, the sounds became clearer. The three of them hid behind a bush, carefully parting the leaves to see that several students were facing off against the monster. Li Han was observing the situation while speaking. "Since they have a lot of people, we can just sit back and watch, right?" Julia agreed, responding that they probably wouldn't have any trouble taking it down. One of the students shouted, "Let me handle it." It was a girl wearing glasses. She had a rather scholarly appearance named Asan Duncan. Ioner recognized her wiping sweat from his brow and asking, "Isn't that Asan from the Duncan family?" Duncan was a family renowned for its excellence and precision. The Duncan family had served the emperor as advisors for generations, while the Duncan family served in the roles of legal officials and treasurers. Li Han observed Asan and thought to himself that if this was Duncan, she could be quite trustworthy. Judging by her stance, she seemed to have learned swordsmanship. Asan was adjusting her glasses and said, "I can totally guess 100%. "Move your pig," she shouted. "You will never escape my calculations." The pig charged at them as if to knock them all away, and she swung her staff, shouting. The staff didn't knock the pig down like Li Han had done. It only created a tiny wound. Asan was bewildered. Her calculations were off. Before she could finish her sentence, the angry pig charged straight at her with a kick. This sent her flying without a word, landing far away. After dealing with Asan, it turned its fury toward the others. While the two girls were scared and teary-eyed, a hand reached out to shield them. It turned out to be the princess. Seeing this, Li Han and the others watched from afar, curious that the princess had decided to show herself. "Li Han, what should I do now?" Li Han didn't respond, only remained silent, contemplating. The monster was now filled with rage, charging toward the princess. She stood still, thinking she had to be perfect, just like she always did. If she observed how it moved and attacked, suddenly the pig let out a painful squeal. The princess hadn't even begun to act when she saw that scene, and became utterly bewildered, unable to believe her eyes. The pig staggered for a moment before collapsing to the ground not far away. Li Han sighed in relief, glad he wasn't caught. It turned out he had secretly helped Princess Nila. Seeing this, she said to him, "Now you know how important it is to approach it from the opposite direction." "How important it is, he replied. "Julia, please keep giving me useful advice." The princess watched them, thinking to herself. Li Han Wadan approached him calmly and said, "Thank you." Li Han humbly replied, "It's nothing, Your Highness." Nulia turned to Ioner, puzzled. "Why are those two so formal? Isn't there a rule that classmates should drop that?" Ioner shrugged, indicating that he didn't understand either. The princess continued, "I assure you, I will repay this favor." Hearing this, Li Han replied, "Then can I ask for one thing?" The princess calmly agreed, saying, "Go ahead." She thought to herself about what he might ask. Li Han then stated, "Actually, please suggest an easy subject to get high marks in. After all, you have many connections with others." Hearing this, the princess was surprised, thinking, "An easy subject to get high marks? What does he mean? Is he really just trying to see which subject can easily get high marks? Is he testing me?" He smiled friendly and continued, "You must know a few subjects, right?" She fell silent for a moment, hesitating. In fact, the princess hadn't finished speaking when a loud shout echoed from afar. "I know what kind of lesson you're looking for. I know better than anyone." Li Han broke out in a sweat, thinking, what is this ominous feeling? The shivering sensation he had felt before this atmosphere. Before he could finish his thoughts, he felt a chill behind him as the teacher's gloomy voice echoed. "That's just cruel teacher moving closer to that dark-faced Sam. That's the alchemist Kim right there. And you, feeling choked up, think that this is the same feeling as when you met the university professor in your past life, Li Han, continuously trying to motivate yourself not to be afraid. You must calm down, you think to yourself. I'm not the immature student I used to be. Surely this will be an interesting subject if I have enough passion and love for it." The teacher looks at Lei Han, who is confidently answering, and replies, "That's what I think too." But it seems the teacher is still hesitant, saying that Li Han isn't quite outstanding enough to add more. "I will create that passion and love for you," he says, making you panic and respond, "I think I'm not ready to learn that subject yet." The students behind see the teacher enthusiastically waving at Oliver and Li Han and immediately start whispering, no doubt the infamous family. The professor wants to recruit him. Meanwhile, the princess quietly watches with a slightly displeased and unwilling expression, while Li Han can only sigh internally and painfully tell himself not to be jealous just because of this. The teacher silently exhales, and after a moment, Uragum approaches a corner where there's a wild boar, just like the monsters the students encountered in the jungle while looking for Huai Thao, and starts to pet the creature's fur. Then he tells the students, "I think that's enough for today." Unfortunately, the other group of creatures hasn't crossed paths with you yet. The students, still bearing many injuries, stand there in shock, unable to believe it. After a long pause, one stutters to ask, "So, does that mean the professor intentionally led them to us?" The teacher appears completely nonchalant and replies, "Don't tell me you thought I would only let you gather herbs. The goal for today is for you to face different situations while searching for herbs, whether you catch it or avoid it. Running or hiding from it, an alchemist must have skills to deal with unexpected situations." He adds without hesitation, "You lot with your thick heads, do you understand?" Hearing this, they grimace, thinking that jerk, and Iona, are a bit confused, asks, "So we don't need Huai Thao, right?" The three of them bring the bushes they've picked to show the teacher. Iona, puzzled, says, "We went through a lot to get these. Look, we found it." Teacher Uragum is extremely surprised and exclaims, "What, I didn't think you would find it." He happily puts his arm around them, saying, "Well, then you've passed the subject, so these talented students are here to learn this." Teacher Uragum says, just as I planned, student Laihan, "You have to take this subject." Lihan sighs, looking distressed, thinking to himself, "I'm doomed." But while Teacher Uragum thinks to himself, "This kid seems very mature. Kids his age often rebel, but he doesn't." Lihan tells the teacher, "Because I defeated the wild boar and collected some Huai Thao. So I will give you a privilege," he says. Lihan, hearing this, looks confused and asks, "A privilege?" The teacher continues, "I have a hut in the forest. You can go there anytime you want during this school year." Hearing this, you panic and ask, "What are you planning to make me work for free?" The teacher sees Lihan's bewildered and confused expression and clears his throat, then says, "Let me explain further. Now, what do you think students need the most?" And answers himself, "Snacks. Your lives here are already quite chaotic, and just a week is enough to make it a complete mess." Lihan realizes, agreeing with the teacher, "Right, this limited menu is unbearable, and everyone in the tower is of royal descent. I know you understand," the teacher continues, "and in my hut, there are plenty of fresh ingredients, not to mention the fresh vegetables and fruits I personally picked." Hearing this, Lihan's eyes light up, thinking, "So that means a real buffet?" Then he turns to tightly grasp the teacher's hand, smiling joyfully. "The alchemist's craft is truly amazing, Professor." The teacher, hearing this, also happily holds his hand and laughs. "Ho, ho, ho, ho! You understand my intentions, right?" Today's class has ended, and the students begin to gather in groups, chatting animatedly. Some friends standing from afar look at a monster boar lying unconscious on the ground, thinking, "Indeed, that's the crazy professor. And he released the wild boar for us to handle." Some lament, "I'm never taking this subject again," while others, still shaken, think, "I thought I was done for." Some people lament in despair, saying they'll never study this subject again, while others are still shaken, thinking they were done for. In that atmosphere, Li Han stood still, sweat dripping down, sighing quietly, as he thought about what strange complaints he was going to make. But there was nothing left to surprise him anymore. After a moment, a light smile returned to his lips, as he immediately recognized that his priority now was... He thought of the serene, fresh space in a small, beautiful house, with a crystal-clear stream gently flowing, the sound of water trickling delightfully in his ears, and the morning rays dancing on the surface of the water. Creating a dazzling array of colors that was incredibly beautiful, he realized the truth. What he needed most was to ensure their meals. A moment later, the three of them, Li Han, Yoner, and Nulia, struggled to pull the unconscious pig closer to the hut of Teacher Uragum. He panted, wiping the sweat from his forehead after laboriously dragging the pig a long way, and thought to himself that he had learned how to handle animals for food from all along, but doing it alone was quite a hassle. While he was resting and pondering how to handle this animal, Yoner stepped in front of him and called out, "Li Han." Then he heard Yoner continue, "Let me help you," although there was still a hint of fear on her face. He looked at her slightly pale face and asked, "You don't look so well. Are you okay?" Yoner shyly smiled and replied, "Of course I'm fine, but could you share some meat with me?" This made Julia, who was standing at a distance, extremely astonished. She hurried over and asked, "Are you really planning to butcher it, your old nobles? You don't know how to do it." Li Han looked at her and called out, "Julia." Then Ioner and Li Han stared at her, asking, "Are you disgusted by meat?" Hearing this, Julia was a bit taken aback. She gently closed her eyes, frowned, and sighed as if she were in a difficult situation. After a moment of contemplation, as if she had made up her mind, she stepped towards Li Han and Ioner with the wild pig and said to them, "Let me show you the skills of a hunter." Li Han felt incredibly delighted at this. He thought to himself that Julia was really good at this, while Ioner, coming from a family well-versed in handling materials, made him quite sure that with these two friends, things would go smoothly. Suddenly, teacher Uragum arrived with a large bag and placed it on the ground for them. He said, "Here are some tools." Lihan felt grateful and replied, "Thank you, Professor." They held sharp knives in their hands, covering the pig's eyes to reduce its fear, then said to each other, "Now let's get started." Yulia glanced over and saw Lihan comfortably getting to work. She watched him skillfully and thought, "He's better than I thought," then wondered, did they teach such things in the Wadan family? Ioner also showed no signs of falling behind her two friends. She tied the rope securely around the pig's body and said, "Now we'll skin it, cut it into pieces, and hang it up." They carefully considered and decided, "We shouldn't throw away the intestines because we can make sausages." Lihan sat there fanning the charcoal, his face turning pale, silently, lamenting and sighing, wondering how much longer this hellish life would last. Maybe I should save some here for later. After a while, the teacher came over and saw the pieces of meat being hung up, while Lihan was fanning the charcoal with fragrant smoke rising. He joyfully praised them. "Oh, are you all planning to smoke the meat, impressive?" The teacher rested his chin on his hand, pondering, "No matter how good the weather is, meat can spoil easily. Smoking is the right choice." He stood there watching and thinking about Lihan. "I'm quite impressed with that kid. Even though he's only been studying the art of Kim for 3 days, he's reached this level. But to smoke it so skillfully, he's constantly exceeding my expectations," the teacher thought happily. Smiling and looking at Lihan with a gaze that was both proud and a bit admiring after a while, it seemed the food was ready. Ioner and Yulia were sitting at the table waiting for the meal, while teacher Uragum seemed to have something difficult to say and was a bit shy. He turned slightly, clearing his throat a few times awkwardly. Seeing this, Lihan, being very perceptive, stepped up to his teacher and asked, "Are you hungry, sir?" The teacher felt a bit embarrassed and shy, but still replied honestly, "Well, just a little." So Lihan immediately asked, "Do you have bread and butter?" And this left teacher Uragum extremely surprised, asking back, "Lihan, are you really planning to go all out?" A little later, everything was ready for a hearty meal. Lihan raised his cup while quickly stirring the pan over the large fire. Teacher Uragum was laboriously pulling a cart full of supplies over, which made Ioner very happy. Lihan placed a large piece of meat on the wooden cutting board on the dining table, and the food was incredibly plentiful and appetizing. They happily said to each other, "Let's eat." On the table, there was also a special seasoning from teacher Uragum, which was jam. Teacher Uragum took a piece of bread and ate it deliciously, while Ioner and Yulia happily spread jam on their bread, forgetting all their fatigue. Ioner, with her cheeks full of food, praised, "The jam is super delicious, Professor." The teacher is enjoying skewered meat, laughing and chatting, saying to eat to their heart's content while they can, as these moments of enjoyment won't always come around. He praises Lihan, even though he knows she has worked some magic on the meat. But the flavor is truly divine, perfectly cooked meat, sweet and tender with a bit of buttered bread, a gentle breeze, and a few friends on a calm Tuesday. They eat, talk, and laugh until they're full. It turns out happiness is just that simple. They gathered a few large bags of meat. Ioner sat watching, pondering, and said to Lihan, "We've already got a lot of smoked meat, but there's still unprocessed meat here. What should we do with it?" Lihan sighed beside him and replied, "I'm too full to eat anymore." The two of them stared blankly at the pile of meat, unsure of what to do. But Julia, sitting behind them, suddenly spoke up. "What about sharing it with friends in the tower?" Hearing this, Ioner and Lihan immediately turned around, both excited, and he cheerfully asked her, "Are you suggesting we sell the meat?" Ioner chimed in, praising the idea as brilliant, which left Yulia confused, asking, "When did I say that?" The two were still happily discussing plans, with one confidently stating that all the students in the Dragon Tower are wealthy. "That shouldn't be a problem, right?" The other agreed. "They're all royalty, so they wouldn't want handouts," which left Julia speechless, not understanding what was happening. The two seemed energized. With renewed enthusiasm, they discussed their plan, causing Yulia to watch from a distance, bewildered, wondering if all royals were like this. It turns out the truth is that Lihan has a motto: you have to work to eat, while Yuna believes in saving every penny. But Julia was unaware of this. She stood up and asked them, "Are you really planning to sell the meat for money?" They replied, "Yes, do you want to join us?" But she firmly refused, "No way, I just want to share it with my friends." Seeing this, Lihan said, "It's up to you, but you might regret it." Ioner, standing beside him, laughed and added, "He's right, friendship is temporary, but the economy is forever," which made Yulia awkwardly respond, "You two be quiet." Teacher Uragum, standing at a distance, was picking his teeth while pondering. All three of these students are talented and passionate, but they also seem to have a rebellious streak. He moved to a large tree to rest and enjoy the breeze. He quietly concluded that he was quite sure there would be a headache in the future. In the school, there stood a massive tower, the Dragon Tower, looming in the distance, looking grand and somewhat mysterious. This tower was built far from the main tower, always warmly welcoming students like the fragrance of fresh leaves. However, today felt a bit unusual. A boy nearby sniffed a few times, looking puzzled. He turned to his friend beside him, who was also sniffing, and asked, "What is that smell?" It turned out to be the delicious aroma of grilled meat, sizzling and wafting an enticing scent. A person wearing an apron was flipping the meat. It was Lihan. Seeing someone approach, he joyfully opened his arms and greeted, "Hello, everyone. You haven't eaten anything yet, have you?" The sight before all the students left them utterly stunned. They asked the owner and Li Han, "What are you two doing? Don't tell me Li Han is inviting us to sit and eat what you prepared for everyone?" The students were ecstatic, hardly believing their ears. Just as they were about to celebrate, he continued, "But wait, each person needs to pay 1 silver coin." Moments later, the students were eating meat, tears of joy in their eyes. "How long has it been since we last had meat?" a girl said, cheeks stuffed, marveling. "I can't believe how it melts in my mouth." They're giving us this amazing treat. All the students were eating and joyfully shouting, "Warren as Michael, Warren as Michael." Li Han and Iona stood to the side, observing everyone. He excitedly said to her, "I didn't think our business would be doing so well. We're selling it for 3 times the price outside the academy." Then they both laughed, enjoying the moment, but wondered who would actually buy meat here. It was just a matter of supply and demand, until a friend named Ganando suddenly appeared from somewhere looking bewildered and asked, "What's with all this noise? I'm starving." He stepped out, catching a whiff of the delicious food, and was stunned, mouth agape. "What is this?" Li Han saw him and called out, "Ah, there you are, Ganando." Then he warmly invited him to join in, making Ganando exclaim in disbelief, "Can I really eat with you?" He quickly sat down at the table, picked up a fork, and cheerfully said, "Then I won't hold back. Thanks a lot." But just as you were about to touch the fork to that delicious piece of meat, a hand reached out to stop you. It was Li Han, who cheerfully smiled at Ganando and said, "1 silver, please?" Ganando looked surprised and confused. When asked if he was collecting all the money, Li Han replied in a very convincing and nonchalant tone, "A noble's honor doesn't allow for free stuff." Meanwhile, Ganando looked a bit bewildered and helpless. "But I don't have any money. You know that." The principal, Li Han, immediately reached into his pocket to pull something out and replied, "That's not a problem." He placed a contract and a pen in front of Ganando. "Just write down how much you ate and sign your name here." Seeing this, Ganando trembled and called out to Li Han. He gripped the pen tightly in his hand, speechless, and then joyfully shouted, "How are you so amazing?" as he quickly scribbled on the contract. Then Ganando sneaked off to a hidden corner and whispered to himself, "How can I cut ties with someone as wonderful as this? I really have an eye for people," he thought, while Li Han quietly turned away, sighing in relief, thinking that Ganando wouldn't agree to this request. Before long, his naive friend was already diving into the feast. He began to dig into the delicious grilled meat, feeling incredibly happy and exclaiming, "So this is what friendship is." Meanwhile, behind him, Li Han and Iona were sharing knowing smiles, and it seemed like everyone was happy today. Time flew by quickly. The sun was already high in the sky, shining brightly. The students finished their classes, and the principal of the Kim Technique Academy headed inside the tower to prepare for the next lesson. Someone softly said, "Basic magical properties, huh? What do they think of us?" A girl accompanying him sighed in a tone of disbelief. "Do they think nobles like us need to take classes like this?" The girl confidently continued, "We're already perfect." This made Li Han, who was standing behind, chuckle softly. "Ha ha ha, it's shocking to hear them say that," he thought as all the students filed into the lecture hall looking for seats. A wisp of green smoke quietly floated in to observe them from afar. A voice rang out above them. "Good morning, everyone." Li Han looked up, pondering, "Is that voice?" Sure enough, just as he thought, a familiar large green skull appeared. It was Principal OSU who continued speaking. "Hello, you metal-headed kids." This made Li Han panic, thinking to himself, "Don't tell me the professor responsible for teaching magical properties is the principal." The principal noticed the slightly guilty expressions on the students' faces and chuckled, asking, "Ho ho, what did you all eat?" Then, seeing the students' worry and restlessness, he continued, "I thought it would take a month for you to find food." One student hearing this felt both helpless and incredulous, immediately asking, "Do you mean we really have to survive and find food?" The student then expressed his resistance, saying, "Why do we have to listen to him?" Before he could finish, the principal interrupted. "All right, let's not talk about that nonsense anymore," startling him as Principal APU continued. "I'm glad you metal-headed kids learn quickly. New students enroll every year, but the students from the Azure Dragon Tower are always the slowest. The best are from the Black Tortoise Tower, followed by the White Tiger. Compared to them, the Azure Dragon Tower students and are all high-ranking nobles. They've never had to do anything difficult since childhood, so they adapt the slowest. But they can reach this level, it's impressive." The principal's gaze fixed on a corner. And clearly the focal point was Principal OSU, who was staring intently at Li Han. Realizing he was being evaluated, Li Han subtly turned his face away, thinking, "I shouldn't make eye contact with him." Meanwhile, Principal OSU was thinking to himself, "I knew this kid was different from the first time I met him." He used positive and beautiful words to assess Li Han, thinking, "It's unbelievable that someone so free could come from such a strict family." The principal believed that a free and liberated mind was the essence of a magician. And pushing his students to their limits is also for that reason. He himself enjoys it immensely. At that moment, the student from earlier stood up and asked, "Excuse me, Principal, can you tell us what the important thing in this class is?" Hearing this, the principal replied with a question. "That's a good question. So what do you think it is?" This made the student flustered and confused as he replied, "I'm not sure." He then turned to glance at his friend with a puzzled expression, as he himself didn't know the answer. Seeing this, Principal OSU stepped in to provide the answer. "It's when you graduate from here and cause trouble outside the academy. That scoundrel emperor will blame me for it." Hearing this, the students were utterly astonished, their mouths agape in disbelief. The principal continued, "Do you know how much trouble your seniors have caused?" It turned out that many students from previous years had created countless problems for Principal OSU, which led him to secretly devise a plan for himself. He calculated that this lesson on magical properties would be his excuse. Indeed, after those lessons, he gradually wrote reports about how students behaved mischievously and destructively. Principal OSU continued speaking to them, saying that whenever a messenger arrives to talk about your seniors, becoming a trashy person means we won't be punished for it anymore. The teacher quietly flew up, leaned in close to that classmate and glared, asking, "Got it?" The sharp gaze made the classmate tremble in fear and stammered a response, "Yeah." In the end, he asserted that wizards are unpredictable. "Don't argue that you're not one of them, because that will only make me more irritated." After that, the teacher ordered everyone to quickly open their books and read the first page. The class opened their books, looking at the messy lines with dismay, but feeling utterly helpless, they all shouted together, "I will not cause trouble with magic." Teacher OSU still seemed unsatisfied. Pointing, he demanded the class to read louder, causing everyone to strain to read, "I will not cause trouble with magic. I will not cause trouble with magic." Seeing this, Li-Han sighed inwardly, thinking to himself, is this really effective? While the loud shouts of the students echoed, "I will not cause trouble with magic. I will not cause trouble with magic," Li-Han sighed again, thinking, is this really effective? After a while, Teacher OSU appeared satisfied. He said, "Now I hope today's lesson will strengthen your kind hearts, and we need 2 volunteers for the lesson." Some students hearing this secretly turned their heads away. They were afraid that if they accidentally made eye contact with the teacher, they would become unwilling volunteers. Seeing this, Li-Han thought to himself that everyone was ignoring it. He knew this was a tough task, but Teacher OSU quietly observed everyone smiling with a hint of mischief, saying, "If no one volunteers, it will be harder." Seeing that situation, Li-Han thought there must be a reward. Then he raised his hand and stood up, volunteering. "I will." Amid the confusion of Ionor sitting next to him, Teacher OSU noticed and said in a long voice, "You're quite the standout, huh?" Li-Han showed no sign of fear as he replied, "I just think it's a great honor to assist the professor I respect," he said. Hearing this, Teacher OSU didn't show any joy or excitement, casually saying, "I'm not surprised by such empty words anymore, but oh well. Opportunities only come to those who are ready to stand up and seize them." Li-Han heard this and felt a sweat break out, thinking deeply. Surely the teacher knows I volunteered for the sake of others. A voice sharply interrupted, "Are you crazy?" causing Li-Han to jump. It turned out to be Ganando next to him, looking pale, trying to stop him. Who knows what that crazy principal will make you do? A student saw this and placed a hand on his shoulder, saying, "Don't stop him, Ganando. He's not crazy. He's sacrificing for us." Ganando looked confused and asked, "Really?" Then he tried to reassure himself, thinking, if that's the case, I should also sacrifice for my friends. Move. He still struggled to motivate himself to move. "Come on, you want to shout, 'I want to volunteer too'?" However, before Ganando could finish his sentence, he noticed his classmate Asan, the bookworm, sitting in front, had already raised her hand and stood up, causing him to stare in disbelief. Teacher OSU looked at her calmly, assessing. "You're the stubborn one from the Danka family, huh? Your family always seems to handle paperwork so well." Hearing this, he calmly nodded and replied, "Thank you for the compliment, sir." Li-Han stood to the side, recalling that it was indeed Asan. Was she also aiming for the reward like him? He glanced at her, standing on the other side, seemingly a bit confused. Asan seemed to sense Li-Han's gaze. She turned to him and said, "Let me repay you for helping me before." Li-Han replied, "You don't need to go that far." Asan calmly responded, "You're being ridiculous. The Danka family always does everything fairly." Suddenly, Teacher OSU appeared from behind them, looking pleased. "It's great to see you all getting along. But we still have work to do," which startled Li-Han, Ionor, and Asan. The teacher lightly cast a spell, and dense sheets of paper filled with rules appeared in the air. These are the regulations that students need to firmly grasp for the next lesson. Take a look at these safety rules and copy them by hand, equal to the number of students here. His words made the students' faces turn pale. Before long, time had drifted into the evening. The pink clouds lazily floated in the brilliant sunset, creating a truly beautiful and poetic atmosphere, while the students were still hunched over. Copying furiously the rules that Teacher OSU assigned, Asan groaned, "I can't believe this, I can't believe it." He was furious, grinding his teeth. "That old man is making us do this unnecessary work when he could finish it in a blink." Li-Han copied while observing Asan and the invisible flames raging from not far away, thinking to himself, "I hope he doesn't faint." Li-Han was copying while observing the invisible flames rising not far away, thinking to himself, "He won't faint, will he?" Then you think you understand the principal's intentions, like he probably thinks that. Relying on magic will get you enough people out there. You ponder further, not even being allowed to use the most basic spells. Then what's the point of writing magic? He's a dedicated teacher, so I'm sure he's hinting at something here. Li-Han suddenly stood up, causing Asan to look confused and ask what he was doing. Turning back, he replied, "I'm looking for hints to solve this situation, so there might be something useful here." Asan thought to himself that it looked like he was stealing ideas and asked if that was okay. He tilted his head slightly and quietly replied, "There's no rule saying we can't, plus this is the principal's lecture hall." Asan, hearing this, looked a bit dazed and responded, "Oh." Then he lightly pushed with his hand and casually said, "I guess it's not a big deal to steal a little once in a while. Let's split up and search quickly." Both of them began rummaging through the lecture hall. Asa said, I don't see any notes at all. Li-han agreed from the side. Me neither. Let's try looking from a different angle. Suddenly he stopped and softly hummed. It turned out in front of him was a drawer that seemed quite ordinary, but was emitting a strange blue light. And it had a bit of mystery to it. Seeing that, he waved his hand and called back, Asan, I've found some strange magic here. Asan immediately stopped and asked, Really? Then he walked over to him, both staring intently at the blue light emanating from the drawer. She looked a bit skeptical and asked, Open it. He hesitated for a moment, then pulled the drawer open, and a giant glowing green skull popped out. Sure enough, it was Principal OSU, leaving both of them stunned. Li-han, seeing this, asked her friend in confusion, Is this an illusion spell? The principal spoke, The fact that you opened this drawer means you've decided to stop doing pointless work and start using your brains to think. I hope it happens faster. You all look so pathetic taking so long to do those things. The principal's words made Asan and Li-han turn pale. Principal OSU continued, This is the first spell called Basic Manipulation. You'd better learn it quickly. Then handed them a mysterious piece of paper. That's it for now. And he immediately vanished, leaving only a faint blue light flickering. Asan leaned on his knees trembling and said, So the principal really has some intention behind this. She was frustrated. She shouted loudly, What kind of ridiculous method is this? I don't understand anything. Why teach like this? Then she stood up and said, Let's protest together. If we go together, the principal will also... She called out but didn't get a response, turning to see her friend intently holding the paper left by Principal OSU and reading it carefully as if studying. She felt a bit speechless and glared at him. You traitor! This made Li-han feel guilty, and he quickly replied, Sorry, I can't help it. Li-han then smiled and said to Asan, But think about it, what good will complaining do? The principal is crazy. She didn't know how to respond. Since she seemed to have no answer, she stood silently thinking. She felt as if the principal shouted, That's the rule of enroll, then crossed her arms and concluded, About 95% failure. Li-han sighed in defeat. I'm surprised you think there's even a 5% chance of success. Well, let's just practice. He read the content. This is about basic control. The important things in casting spells are the thought of the incantation and the hand signs. The incantation for basic control is move control. Both of them worked hard, practicing diligently for a long time. Li-han knelt on the floor, pointing her wand at the feather pen, trying hard to make it move, but they had tried too many times and still failed. Asan gasped, Oh, I'm out of mana. Li-han, sitting beside him, also started to feel a bit sluggish and patted her shoulder, comforting her. Take a break. Li-han thought to herself that magic really wasn't easy. It seemed like such a simple gesture. But the magical energy gathered differently each time. He tried to calm himself and motivate himself, as if he were performing a balancing act, focusing. Li-han. It felt like this. He calmed down and tried to comfort himself, thinking of it as his last chance. Just thinking that there was only 1 minute left until the mission ended, Li-han tried to use his imagination. He thought of the feather pen, a straight object like a bamboo stick, but as light as a feather. He swung his wand, focusing all his energy. Then Li-han shouted, Move! And pointed his wand at the feather pen, causing a shimmering beam of light to shoot from the wand to the pen's body, not disappointing him at all. The pen was indeed gently trembling. Immediately that feather pen soared into the air, leaving Li-han bewildered and his friend Ajan with her mouth agape. Li-han didn't show any excitement, reminding himself that this was indeed the flower family's wickedness, and now he just needed to move it slowly to the right place. The paper still in Azan's hand was not yet recovered from the shock. The pen was still vibrating lightly in the air. Li-han stared at it without blinking, then continued to wave his wand, creating a beam of light directed at it suddenly. The two of them stared blankly out the window, realizing that Li-han had controlled the feather pen to fly out through the window. His magic was so strong that it made the pen slice through an apple, hanging on a branch. Then it stuck firmly into the tree trunk. Asan, seeing this, panicked and asked, What did you just do? Did you shoot it out of the window like a hedgehog? Li-han stammered in response, I thought so too. After a while of trying to cast the spell, Li-han picked up the instruction sheet and noted that this spell had 2 difficulties after chanting. One must continuously focus and control the object. However, after completing that extremely difficult incantation, the control part was equally challenging. He waved his wand, determined to try again. Slowly, take your time, no need to rush, Li-han told himself, not noticing that the classroom door was slightly ajar. It turned out that teacher OSU had suddenly appeared. He rushed over, looking at them with interest, asking, Have you managed to do it yet? The teacher saw Li-han practicing and knew that he had succeeded at the initial stage, cheerfully continuing, Then I will write the rest with my magic. Hearing this, Li-han was startled and the pen in the air trembled. He gently raised his hand to cover his head in pain, as it seemed the principal had just cast some spell. He smiled with delight as mysterious rays of light spread throughout the classroom, saying, I hope you recognize my kindness. Before he could finish his sentence, he exclaimed, Oh no! That shout echoed loudly in the tower during sunset. It turned out that unintentionally Li-han had performed some magic on the principal. Asan, standing next to him, was shocked and asked, Did the student just aim at the principal? And shot like that? He covered his mouth excitedly, laughing, You're so cool! Meanwhile, Li Han's face turned pale as he turned back, snapping, "Shut up, you crazy." A moment later, the principal slowly turned back from somewhere with a feather on his forehead. He opened his wide mouth, smiling. "Oh ho! It seems you grasped this spell faster than I thought. I must admit, you are a bit better than that stubborn look." Li Han stood there, seeing the teacher feeling dazed, thinking, "Is that it?" He assessed that the teacher seemed quite happy, so he took advantage of the moment when the principal didn't look too scary and bravely said, "Dear respected principal, can you give me tips on how to control it better?" The teacher asked back, "Li Han, can you chant the spell, but can't control it?" He immediately replied, "Yes, I can." This made Asan, sitting next to him, look up in admiration. He was indeed very impressive. The principal told Li Han, "That's already very good. So you don't need to push yourself too hard." Hearing that compliment, he sighed in relief, thinking it was just the magical energy. So it wasn't. However, before he could rejoice for long, he heard the delighted laughter of teacher OSU, who cheerfully teased him, "Ha ha ha, I'm just kidding. The chanting part is the hard part. Controlling it just takes a bit of practice. But you really are unusual being able to shoot it out like an arrow. But how you're the only one who can figure it out?" Hearing this, he also appeared cheerful and bright, replying, "I understand now. Thank you, teacher, for your guidance." He finally met the teacher's gaze and continued, "I will try even harder." This left teacher OSU stunned, joking, "This kid is not upset at all, but he has an impressive expression." The teacher, while thinking, stretched out his hand towards them, continuing, "The issue with magic is that the more you use it, the more you will tame it, so there's nothing to worry about. Now let's go eat, shall we?" The principal used some special magic that made Li Han's feet lift off the ground, floating in the air. He panicked and shouted, "What is this? Is this teleportation?" Li Han tried to push himself down to the ground to regain his balance, but it didn't work. He shot off to another space, and after a while he leaned on his knees, gasping for breath, and sighed. That teacher really never does anything unnecessary. But he used time-space magic to bring himself to the canteen. Looking around, he saw no one else and thought, "Where did that teacher teleport me to? This is a hassle." It turned out he had been teleported to the infirmary to recover his energy. The huge canteen was completely empty, eerily silent. Li Han observed and pondered, "There's no one here. Maybe it's already past lunchtime." He looked at the bread and 2 rice balls on the plate, feeling dejected. "Am I eating this again today? But it's okay. I still have that bacon I saved earlier." While Li Han was happily eating, a shadow quietly appeared behind him. It was the princess. She gently approached him and said, "So you're here, Warden Art." Hearing her call, Li Han turned around in surprise. "Oh, it's the princess." He stood up politely and replied, "What do you need from me, Your Highness?" The princess took out a stack of papers from her belongings and handed them to him, saying, "These are the documents you asked for last time." Seeing this, Li Han was overjoyed, took them, and happily said, "Oh, thank you so much, princess." He opened the papers and hadn't read long before he suddenly froze. It turns out it lists the popular lecture topics, an overview of basic alchemy, basic royal linguistics, basic dancing, and basic humanities. These aren't easy subjects to score in, but popular. Moreover, an overview of alchemy is a popular subject. If teacher Uragum heard this from him, he would calmly scratch his nose and say, "Well, at least it's good." Li Han immediately said to her, "Your Highness, I think there's a misunderstanding here. What I mean is this is a list of subjects that are easy to score in, while this is a list of popular subjects, which is completely opposite to what I wanted." The princess, hearing this, looked confused and asked, "What do you mean?" Li Han explained, "Popular subjects have many participants, making it hard to score, while unpopular subjects have fewer competitors, making it easier to score. That's what I meant." After hearing this, she was left speechless. "So you're looking for easy subjects to study. But you're the child of the Wadanat family." The princess recalled his expressions and wondered. She had always thought he was just like other noble children, but he seemed completely different. She quietly rummaged through her pockets again and handed him another list. While preparing that list, I also made a list of subjects to avoid, which includes basic swordsmanship, basic physical training, basic spell combat, and methods of keeping distance. He looked at the list of unpopular subjects. He was delighted and exclaimed, "This is it. I can see the poverty and boredom that no one wants to study in there. First is basic swordsmanship. Very few people go to a magic school to learn swordsmanship. Basic spell combat and keeping distance are the same. Students who come to study magic rarely fight. But why bother? It's exhausting. It's better to know many survival methods right. Thank you very much, princess." The princess saw his expression and didn't know what else to say, turning away. "Well, then I'll be going now." The next morning the air was fresh. Li Han walked alone, thinking, "Everyone has turned me down. What bad luck." It turned out that last night he had invited Ganando to join the classes with him. Hearing that, he sighed in disappointment. "Are you planning to join the unpopular subjects? Why would nobles do that?" Yonner, not at all enthusiastic, replied, "Sorry about that. I have classes scheduled for those times already." Asan was even more vehemently opposed. He grabbed Li Han's shoulder and lamented, "Why are you wasting your time on those trash subjects?" Li Han sighed and casually said, "Well, I'm pretty sure they don't know what's coming for them. Basically, no matter what school it is. The concept of considering students doesn't exist. They surely know there are students participating in their subjects, but those are the ones who don't care much. So to focus on subjects that someone likes, you need other subjects. Subjects where you don't have to do unnecessary things." Li Han reaffirmed that it was a reasonable choice. Redistributing focus, he exclaimed. But still I look at the dark basement with not a single soul around. Why is the basic spell combat class happening down here? The stairs look simple. But why do I feel like it's an omen? There's a saying that all citizens must know, you must never. But why do I look like an omen? There's a saying that every citizen must know, you must never. Thinking about entering a wizard's tower. Even though it looks ordinary from the outside, there are stories trapped inside the tower forever. Li Han had just read those lines from a fairy tale when he was little. Tick, holding his chin, turned to ask, "This fairy tale is a bit exaggerated, isn't it?" His teacher replied, "Well, it does have a bit of exaggeration, young master." He continued, "It truly is a fairy tale. Those trapped in the tower can never escape. Those trapped in the tower can never escape. Because the reality is that they will die." Hearing this, Li Han turned pale, confused as the brief memory ended. He thought of the towering structure and concluded that the enroll tower was a typical example of a magical tower. That's why first-year students rarely dared to explore the academy's tower. Li Han stood there feeling a bit hesitant but still trembling as he encouraged himself. After all, he was just a student, so it should be fine, right? He chuckled to reassure himself. Nothing had ever happened to him on the first floor of the tower or in the dormitory, so just as he was finishing his thought, a cold voice rang out from behind. "Are you heading to the basement, level 1? It turned out to be Teacher OSU. Hearing the call, Li Han was startled and turned his head back, worried about why the principal was here. It scared me to death, but in an instant he realized, oh no. This is an opportunity. Immediately, Li Han expressed his joy and turned to reply. "Oh, esteemed principal, it's so nice to see you." He bowed sincerely. "I'm preparing to go down to the basement. Could you share a bit of your lecture with me?" Hearing this, Teacher OSU laughed and replied, "Oh, what I'm about to teach you is nothing at all." Then he conjured a daisy mockingly and said, "I'll bring you a flower if you see me tomorrow." Li Han, hearing this, felt his spirit lift, forcing a smile. He laughed, but inside he was furious, cursing that damn old man. A being who could laugh without any malice or anger from within could only be a graduated student. Down below, like a bright torch flickering, it illuminated the path for Li Han. He walked cautiously while pondering, even though that old man had scared him like that. But down here it looked pretty normal. He arrived at the classroom door and paused under the nameplate, thinking to himself, "But why do I have a bad feeling about what's behind this door? It must just be a feeling, right?" Suddenly 2 other students approached, catching his attention. They were laughing and chatting while Li Han stood behind observing them. "I know there are a few people taking this class," he thought. He sighed in relief, thinking there were still many students around. Why was he the only one here? Then he heard one of his classmates ask, "Wait, where are we?" They all looked up at the nameplate for basic spellcasting, keeping their distance. Did we come to the wrong class? Almost running away, they left Li Han with a gentle breeze. They continued to talk to each other quickly. Then one person wondered, "But is anyone even taking this subject?" The other person confidently replied, "No way. My friends were scared and ran away." Li Han stood there feeling sad, seeing no hope for companionship. He gently pushed the classroom door, not expecting that inside there were already 3 other students sitting there. Seeing this, Li Han felt a bit comforted. There were still 3 people. The students whispered to each other, "I think this guy came to our class by mistake." Li Han looked at their faces and guessed they were wondering a lot about his presence. He thought to himself, "They probably think I came here because I don't know what this class is." He looked up at the desk and noticed a small blue orb, puzzled. "But what are these orbs?" Suddenly, from a dark corner, a voice rang out from a mysterious young man. "It's time. Please take your seat," which startled Li Han. He turned his head back, not knowing someone was sitting there. The other students were also very surprised. "What is this? Is there someone there?" It was a man with pale skin, a sorrowful gaze, and long fangs. "Is he a vampire?" At that moment, the young man introduced himself. "My name is Vodali Bagret. I will be in charge of the basic spellcasting course." Keeping his distance, he picked up the orb on the desk and continued in a very humble tone, hoping everyone would help him. Vodali began his lesson. "What you see in front of you is a sphere made from soul stone. Keep your distance." He picked up the orb on the table and continued in a very humble tone, hoping everyone would help, and then he began his lesson. "What you see before you is a celestial body made from spirit stone. That's a type of ore that's really compatible with magical energy, and at some point, when the stars align, it will emit a divine energy. The crystal is the material created from absorbing that energy, so please stand up and channel your magical energy into that orb." Hearing that request, Li Han felt a bit anxious, wondering if she could actually do it. She placed her hands on the orb, recalling that she had previously failed at some basic spells, like illumination. However, immediately all the orbs flew up simultaneously, surprising not just Li Han, but also the other students. She looked at the blue orb hovering above her head, thinking, "Can I really do this so easily? Don't tell me it's not just some ordinary crystal orb." After a moment of contemplation, she concluded that they were artifacts. At first glance, she was quite sure the professor had created them. She also remembered hearing that self-made artifacts are very expensive. Just then, a classmate behind her suddenly exclaimed in shock and confusion. Oh, it turns out her crystal orb had gone out of control, soaring up at an incredibly fast speed, leaving her no choice but to panic cover her head and warn everyone that it might break the ceiling. But just before the orb hit the ceiling, it gradually slowed down and then stopped hovering in midair. Teacher Vodali looked at the scene seeming unfazed and told the students that the orb connects with their will so they can control it. However, I've placed some restrictions on it so it won't break this lecture hall. Hearing this, the purple-haired classmate let out a sigh of relief saying, "Thank goodness." But before she could finish her sentence, she gasped in surprise because the orb had shot off at high speed, almost crashing straight into her. Seeing her nearly fainting from fear, the teacher calmly finished his sentence. "But those restrictions don't apply to you. Be careful not to break the orb, okay?" While the classmate looked up, her face pale, she complained to the teacher, "I might break it first." Teacher Vodali didn't seem to care about her fear and continued to instruct the class. "Keep the orb hovering." Laihan continued to practice while thinking that this professor seemed a bit unusual. He ignored her completely. Teacher Vodali asked everyone to draw a circle. Witnessing everything that had just happened, Lihan struggled to control the crystal orb while thinking that even if it was just an artifact, this was still too difficult. It wasn't moving the way she wanted. Just then, a classmate shouted, "Professor, I've drawn a circle." The teacher saw this and didn't show any excitement or surprise, just calmly told him, "Do it again." The classmate looked surprised, but quickly agreed. The hourglass had been flipped over countless times. Time passed, and Lihan began to feel confused, thinking, "Don't tell me this is all I'll be doing in this class." So she stood up and asked the teacher, "Excuse me, Professor, how long do we need to draw the circle?" The teacher looked puzzled as to why she would ask such a childish question. He quickly replied, "Of course, until you can draw a complete circle." Hearing this, the students were at a loss for words. The previously enthusiastic classmate who had drawn the circle now stood up, trembling, and asked the professor, "Can I go to the restroom?" They heard the teacher reply, "You don't need to ask for permission for that." Hearing the teacher's nonchalance, he and another classmate quietly left the classroom. Fearfully thinking to herself, "What kind of class is this?" she left, leaving Lihan still practicing diligently, and the purple-haired classmate looking bewildered. She called out to the others, "Take me with you." Her face grew increasingly pale, her eyes losing focus, but she still tried to stammer, "Take me with you." Before she could finish her sentence, she collapsed to the ground with a thud unclear if she had fainted or not. Seeing that scene, Lihan was also taken aback. She thought to herself, was she really going to act that way? She approached the girl and gently patted her, asking, "Hey," as she helped her up. She noticed that the girl's face had turned pale, as if she had lost all her energy. She whispered, "My mana." It turned out she wasn't just acting. That girl had truly exhausted herself. Lihan quickly moved closer, helping her up, while saying, "Excuse me, Professor, it seems she fainted from using up all her mana." The teacher remained indifferent, as if nothing had happened. He coldly replied, "When she recovers, continue drawing the circle." The teacher's coldness left Lihan speechless. She thought to herself, "In this situation, I must be the only one still listening." Indeed, after the girl was taken away to rest, only Lihan remained in the classroom, still practicing drawing circles in confusion while the teacher ignored everything around him. "Excuse me, Professor, it seems he fainted from using up all his mana." The teacher remained indifferent as if nothing had happened. He coldly replied, "When he recovers, continue drawing the circle." The teacher's coldness left Lihan speechless, and he thought to himself, "In this situation, I must be the only one still listening." After that girl was taken to rest, only Lihan remained standing confused while practicing drawing circles, while the teacher ignored everything. Sitting in a corner reading seemingly uninterested, you suddenly spoke up, asking the teacher how this assignment would be graded. Hearing that, the teacher closed the book in his hands and replied, "Just follow the guidelines. Grades are based on ranking starting from the highest position depending on the number of students in the class." Upon hearing the teacher's answer, Lihan cheerfully replied, "I understand now." Your eyes sparkled with joy as you secretly celebrated in your heart. This class truly felt like a jackpot. With this assignment, as long as you stayed until the end, you were sure to get a high score. Indeed, this was the ideal class you had been searching for. Lihan was so happy that he wanted to create a poster to promote this class. The repetitive nature of it was so simple, and he was more than willing to let the magic ball bring high scores to his friends. The teacher watched as Lihan happily practiced alone. Not knowing what to say, the teacher appeared indifferent, but in reality, he had taken in all of your expressions. The teacher thought to himself, puzzled. The simple repetition was indeed willing. It turned out that every year the number of students attending this class surged like waves, but they also receded quickly like the tide. Last year, no one signed up for this class at all. However, the teacher Vodali didn't mind. After all, his contract with the principal was to teach the lessons each year, not to gather a large number of students. So his daily routine consisted of being alone in this empty classroom and automatically returning when the class ended. But from now on, the teacher's life would change, because a special new student had appeared and disrupted that routine, and that was Lihan, a bright and mature boy. Based on his demeanor and tone, one could guess he came from a prestigious family. Vodali had no idea about Lihan's magical abilities, but it was not hard to see that he was very special. The teacher thought to himself that if this boy continued to stay, it would be great. This would be the first time he could teach continuously. In the next chapter in the break room, the students were lively discussing the lessons they had just experienced. Lihan sat down, using a very persuasive tone to invite his friends. "Listen up. This is super important. It's a lesson you shouldn't miss. Just sitting there will get you a high score." Iona and Garlando, feeling quite confused after hearing this, asked him to elaborate, what exactly is that class about? Li Han excitedly explained to them, "You let mana flow into the mana stone that the professor prepared, then just practice drawing circles." Garlando asked further, "Oh, what else?" Li Han happily replied, "I don't see any need to do anything else." His words left Iona and Garlando looking bewildered, not understanding what the content of this class was about. They asked again, "Wait, is he trying to trick us?" To which Li Han seemed indifferent to the matter, responding, "What's so important about that? The important thing is that my score is high." Ioner and Garlando felt a sense of fear in their hearts. They thought to themselves, Li Han is indeed special, and Ioner continued to evaluate himself, knowing he had no right to discuss this, but Li Han was indeed someone who would do anything for his own benefit. Seeing his friends looking hesitant, Li Han decided to stop persuading them and casually said, "If you guys keep this up, I have no choice. I have a class to attend, so I need to go." They curiously asked just a bit more, but what is it? Li Han proudly replied, "It's a basic swordsmanship class." This made the two of them gasp, basic swordsmanship at the Magic Academy. Li Han ignored the evaluations and astonishment of his two friends and hurriedly made his way to his class. In no time, he arrived at the training yard in front of the main building to the south, looking around while wondering, is this the training yard for basic swordsmanship? There were many people participating. There were even students from the White Tiger Tower. The students from the White Tiger Tower mainly came from knight families, meaning they were skilled in swordsmanship and took their training very seriously. Li Han observed and thought to himself, so fighting magic is my advantage. It's all good. I'll quickly learn swordsmanship too. A few students noticed Li Han and whispered, "Isn't he from the Asura Dragon Tower? Also, I heard he belongs to the Flower Demon family. So he's here because he learned a bit of swordsmanship culture from his private tutor. He really underestimates swordsmanship." Li Han calmly remained silent, thinking to himself that he had heard they were very proud of their swordsmanship skills, but they seemed more aggressive than he expected. He sighed and concluded, "But it doesn't matter, they're just a bunch of kids." Just then a tall figure with green skin approached him and said, "Hey, you're from the Flower Demon family, right? You come from the Azure Dragon Tower, don't you?" Upon seeing him, Li Han concluded that he was an elf and asked back. He underestimated swordsmanship too much. Li Han calmly kept silent, thinking to himself that he had heard they were very proud of their sword skills, but they seemed more aggressive than he expected. He sighed and concluded, "But it doesn't matter, they're just kids after all." Just then a tall figure with green skin approached and said to him, "Hey, you're from the Flower Clan, right? You come from the Azure Tower, don't you?" Seeing him, Li Han concluded he was an elf and asked back, "So why did that person say, 'I think you've come to the wrong place'? This is a serious martial arts class, not a hand-holding lecture, and you seem so nonchalant about it. I get it. Thanks for letting me know, but it seems like you still don't understand how to make the other person angry. This isn't just swinging a sword like those nobles do. You could really get hurt here. In a match, the students won't hold back." The others around were giggling in agreement with that statement. Li Han waved his hand and said, "All right, if I fight you, I'll be careful not to hurt you too much." His words left the other guy stunned, as if he couldn't believe it. "What did you say?" He gritted his teeth. Just then a soft cough broke the chaotic atmosphere, and a gentle voice rang out. "All right, everyone, gather here." Li Han turned around surprised. The person had a scar running down his eye, looking quite intimidating, and he had a metal leg. Not only that, but he also had a metal arm. You could say that half of his body was made of metal. The calm man spoke up, introducing himself. "I am Professor Inorio, and I will be teaching you this martial arts course." Hearing this, Li Han felt confused, thinking to himself, so the martial arts professor is a bit of a tough guy. He then said, "I'm sure you all have some experience with martial arts already, and now you're just here to refine your skills, or to keep them from wearing down. So I'll help you refine your martial arts skills instead of starting from the basics." Hearing this, Li Han felt a bit guilty and whispered, "Actually, I just came for the grades." Just then a hand gently patted his shoulder. Li Han jumped and turned around, surprised to see a strange student. He thought to himself, "Another elf. He seems to attract the ladies." He then heard the other person ask, "You're Li Han from the Wardenas family, right?" He asked back, "What's up?" The other person replied, "I was wondering why someone from a family famous for magic would come to learn martial arts." Hearing this, Li Han casually responded, "It's pretty obvious. The fewer people learning, the easier it is to get good grades." The other guy was left speechless. Li Han thought to himself, it's better to say it's just for grades than to create misunderstandings if there's another reason. Hearing this, the guy awkwardly replied, "Oh, I see. I'm Gigi from the Moradi family. Just call me Moradi." Li Han cheerfully extended his hand to Moradi. "Nice to meet you, Moradi," he thought to himself. He looks young, but his hands are all calloused. The two shook hands warmly. Li Han thought again. So the Moradi family is the one guarding the harsh northern lands under strict rules, using any means necessary to achieve their goals. At least that's what I think. He looks completely different from the image of that family. Li Han quietly remarked, "I guess rumors aren't always true. Maybe I'll get close to this guy after all." In the past, the Mystic Stone Sword, also known as the Blue Stone Technique, was something Li Han learned from Alalong. True to its name, the Mystic Stone Sword is very tough, and because it's quite difficult to train with nobles, tended to avoid it. But Li Han endured that process. Why? Because he had no other choice. But it helped him build a decent foundation in the martial arts class. The teacher watched him practice, surprised, and asked, Oh, you can use the Mystic Stone sword? The teacher continued with an excited and admiring tone. You've got some talent there. Which family are you from? Deep down, he seemed to have already answered that question for himself, thinking if he's using the Mystic Stone sword, he must be from... Lihan wiped the sweat off his brow and replied to the teacher. The Wardenas family, causing the teacher to look utterly astonished. The teacher pondered, thinking, Wardenas, how can his foundation be so solid if he belongs to that family? The teacher then asked him, may I know why you are studying martial arts? Lihan replied, I believe it's a necessary skill for a noble. The teacher, hearing this, seemed to agree. Indeed, nothing special, he replied. You're right, just as I thought. Lihan noticed the teacher's mood immediately and thought to himself, that expression, the typical expression of a professor feeling a bit anxious. If I say something wrong, my grades will drop. And the answer he wants is probably what I think it is, so he added, I also think so. However, the more I learn, the more I understand the depth of the sword. His words immediately caught the professor's attention. He continued looking extremely determined, his eyes sparkling, clenching his fists and saying, I couldn't stop myself from coming here. The teacher, hearing this, snapped his fingers joyfully and exclaimed the perfect score, leaving Lihan, who was lost in the emotions he had fabricated, surprised and bewildered, as he looked at the teacher, who was awkwardly blaming himself for being reckless. I accidentally spoke out loud what I was thinking and laughed, saying to you, ha, it's nothing. The teacher didn't hesitate to give Lihan sincere praise, saying he was very serious about this and hadn't let his family background hold him back. My progress is better than some of those White Tiger students who are just here to be decoration. The teacher drew his sword from his waist and concluded, thanks to you, I've realized something. I will take you seriously. Anyone who picks up a sword, go ahead. Hearing this, Lihan felt something was off. He blushed and thought to himself that he wasn't quite right. Why did things turn out this way? Time flew by so quickly. The sun was already at its peak, the sky was blue, and the white clouds drifted gently. Lihan sat down on the ground exhausted, and after a while, he lay flat on the ground. Breathing heavily, it was clear he had just gone through an extremely tiring time with the teacher. Teacher Vodali looked down at him from above and said, the Huyentak sword is a technique as tough as stone. It never wavers. No matter what happens, that is the nature of the Huyentak sword. The teacher helped him up while kindly reminding him to engrave that into his heart. That's enough for today. The teacher turned back to the other students. Now the next student, which left everyone stunned and quite apprehensive. Lihan turned away, rubbing his shoulders and muttering to himself, ugh, my whole body aches. I feel like I've been crushed. How many moves did I just take? I thought back to the intense training sessions and realized how many of my weaknesses the teacher had exploited. I thought to myself, he really knows when I'm careless. I kept getting hit, and during that time, each student became disheveled after going through the teacher's training. Meanwhile, he stood calmly resting his sword on the ground, continuously calling the next student. Lihan watched this scene. Adjusting his tie, I concluded that this was no joke. I looked at the students one by one, collapsing from exhaustion, sitting on the ground, and silently acknowledged the outstanding abilities of my teacher. Students from the White Tiger Tower will all become knights in the future, but he dealt with them too easily. If under the name of a swordsman, Alalong is an unshakable rock, then Engon is like water flowing around it. Even though his hands and feet were old, I recalled the valuable and useful advice the teacher had given me during our sword training earlier, and since it was the Balvan sword, I had to move more. The characteristic of dual swords is that they are difficult but flexible. Thinking it over, I realized that the teacher had also repeatedly reminded me, my green-skinned friend, that the Sunwit sword I used needed to be faster. Sharper, don't be too cautious. Throw yourself forward with everything you have. Lihan concluded again that the swordsmanship of Teacher Vodali was truly impressive. I guessed he really was an outstanding professor. He recognized the students' techniques and gave them direct advice. I observed the other students happily chatting with each other, thinking to myself, moreover, maybe it's just me, but why do I feel like I'm the one getting hit the most? Oh, the sky is turning to dusk. Teacher Vodali looked at the birds flying tirelessly in the sunset and silently acknowledged that the time was approaching. Now the teacher turned to the corner where Lihan was resting and called out, get up! Lihan from the Wadanas family quickly stood up and replied, yes, professor. He walked closer to the teacher, wondering why he was being called. Meanwhile, the teacher pointed in another direction and continued, Durugu from the Choi family, come here. Hearing this, Lihan felt extremely curious. He wanted to see who the teacher was calling up with him. Just then, he saw the large green-skinned friend who had caused trouble with him before the class stepping forward. He noticed the aggressive look on his face and thought, isn't this the guy who caused trouble with me before? So his name is Durugu. The two stood facing each other under the evening sky, a hint of rivalry flickering between them while the teacher remained unfazed as if he didn't sense anything strange. Then he threw out a bombshell, now you two will compete. Hearing this, the other students were extremely surprised and stunned. A few friends sitting outside began to realize that this match was indeed going to be interesting to watch. They started whispering to each other, why those two, wondering if it would be fair, as they probably saw that Lihan and that friend had very different physiques. He remained calm despite these thoughts, grinning widely, showing his sharp fangs, looking fierce, and a bit unpredictable. That green-skinned friend Durugu continued to smile confidently at Lihan and replied, yes, professor. The teacher stepped forward. He then handed both of them wooden swords for practice. Meanwhile, Li Han was still in a state of silently evaluating his opponent, thinking, oh, look at his face. He briefly assessed that he seemed very happy to have me as his opponent. This jerk. Li Han tightened his grip on the wooden sword in his hand, thinking to himself, now that things have come to this, I have no intention of backing down. He recalled how he had worked hard training since childhood with his teacher. How so? I thought to myself that I could have used that time to play around, but I didn't do that. Instead, I chose to be continuously beaten learning swordsmanship accurately. I regained my confidence and smiled calmly, thinking this was for moments like this, the 4 reasons Professor Ingurodel chose them. Simply because they are the 2 most outstanding individuals. As swordsmanship is not just about theory, but also about hundreds of practice sessions and thousands of real battles. Only through all of that can one truly comprehend swordsmanship. A simple example is a direct thrust to the opponent's throat, but if you only know how to attack, victory will still be far away. On the contrary, if you understand the theory as the core, then add finesse and adaptability. We will see what true swordsmanship is. These 2 students, Li Han and Durugu, not only grasp that principle, but also have the ability to use magic to enhance their swordsmanship, carrying innate talent within them. To become true knights, after 2 people exchange blows, they immediately return to their positions without saying a word, quietly following the teacher. At that moment, the teacher glanced at Li Han's back, thinking to himself, that swordsmanship ability, although not stemming from a noble lineage, must have come with tremendous pressure from his family. They would surely criticize the Mage lineage for that. Yeah, you're truly a disgrace, Piptia, he thought. But Li Han remained determined to move forward. The teacher tightened his grip on the sword at his waist, concluding that he was indeed a student worthy of praise. Let me guide you to the pinnacle of swordsmanship. The teacher waved his hand, signaling the match to begin. He stood outside, observing silently, judging that this match was worth watching. The reason is that the moonlit swordsmanship of the Choi clan emphasizes speed and rhythm in attacks, while the bluestone swordsmanship focuses on the power of each strike. The teacher concluded that the 2 schools were completely opposite. They will learn a lot from each other. This is the true meaning of the word opponent. At that moment, the green-skinned friend immediately stepped forward, casually smiling at Li Han, asking in a relaxed tone, aren't you going to come at me? Li Han showed no signs of fear, calmly standing still, watching his opponent. Not hearing a response, he took a run-up, lunging forward with his sword, shouting, then let me... He spun quickly, delivering a powerful strike. Drawing impressive and eye-catching sword lines, the tip of the sword moved as fast as the wind, closing in on Li Han's face in the blink of an eye, causing him to flinch slightly and lose focus. His legs bent a bit as he tried to stomp down hard on the ground to maintain his balance. At that moment, he devised a plan. While everyone was still unaware of the situation, he had somehow gathered momentum from his legs to impact the ground, sending tiny, sparkling grains of sand flying straight toward Durugu's face. Before he could understand what was happening, his eyes stung painfully. He quickly shouted and raised his hands to shield his face. Many students outside looked on in confusion, exclaiming, throwing sand. A girl immediately turned to ask the teacher, is that against the rules, Professor? Contrary to the students' expectations, the teacher showed no signs of displeasure or objection to Li Han's little trick. On the contrary, he laughed heartily. That's fantastic. This left the green-skinned friend stammering, unable to find words, staring wide-eyed at the teacher, his face darkening in confusion. After all, in the heart of a teacher with solid swordsmanship expertise, disregarding both means and methods is what truly constitutes a life and death battle. The 2 began to rush at each other, preparing for a real fight that promised to be intense and fierce. The teacher observed Durugu's tear-filled eyes and concluded that Li Han understood this better than anyone. He quickly noticed all the reactions from the students and understood why the whole class was displeased with the situation. Li Han using sand to attack his opponent was likely still very unfamiliar to the other students. After all, they all came from families that place honor above all else, so not knowing was quite understandable. Moreover, he had the mindset to ignore the trivialities around him, to focus on the goal of victory. Indeed, the students were sitting there complaining, pouting, in displeasure, whispering to each other, the teacher is praising him too much. Clearly, Li Han is cheating. How can that be? Meanwhile, the teacher remained satisfied, evaluating, this is what a true swordsman looks like. At that moment, Li Han was continuously changing his techniques with his sword, delivering strikes that were both fast and precise. His ability far exceeded his seemingly weak and harmless appearance, causing the green-skinned friend to feel confused and passive at times. Right now, Li Han's sword was striking straight without showing any mercy, forcing him to quickly raise his sword to block the opponent's attack. However, his eyes were still streaming with tears from the pain caused by the sand. This made him frustrated and annoyed, thinking to himself, I've been too careless thinking about his background. Li Han could clearly see that his opponent was still flustered in his chaotic emotions. Satisfied, he thought to himself, good, the opponent still can't think clearly. He quickly realized he had to seize the opportunity to attack right away, so he rushed in, swinging his sword with great force, creating a storm-like attack. Li Han thought to himself, earlier when I observed, I noticed his skills were too good. That's why I didn't try to attack directly, but focused on finding weaknesses and oversights in my opponent. At that moment, seeing his opponent expose a flaw, he stepped forward, stomping hard on his foot, then continued to swing his sword in a series of attacks, reminding himself that he needed to envision a scenario where he could achieve victory. Watching how Li Han relentlessly sought to attack him, Durugu was also panicking. defending himself and wondering why he was trying so hard. Just then, an unexpected situation occurred. He lost his balance hastily, putting his hands down to the ground, and Li Han's wooden sword lunged toward him, causing him to stagger and fall immediately in pain. Li Han was surprised and bewildered upon seeing this. At that moment, an unexpected situation occurred. He lost his balance and hurriedly put his hand down, causing Li Han's wooden sword to stab forward, making him stagger and fall to the ground in pain. Li Han was surprised and confused by this. Do you really think like that? Meanwhile, he's lying face down on the ground, writhing in pain. Damn, how did it come to this? This isn't the time to overthink. The teacher outside continues to show immense joy. He claps continuously, praising them, making the students around him speechless at his confusing actions. Durugu feels humiliated but still pushes himself up, trying to stand. He shouts loudly, rushing towards me, "I won't let you off the hook." Li Han immediately refocuses, dodging to the side to avoid the sword aimed at him. Both regain their focus, entangled in a fierce exchange, showcasing beautiful sword techniques. And full of skill, Li Han raises his wooden sword, calmly defending while calculating his next move in his mind. Both display determination in every step, the sword slicing through the air, making Teacher Eddie, outside, look very satisfied. Thinking those two are better than I expected, the teacher reflects. He knows they both have great skills, but he didn't expect Durugu to use the moonsword technique to this level. But the more he tries to strike, the more his stamina drains. In contrast, Warden Art remains calm, reacting to every movement of his opponent. The figure of his green-skinned friend seems to split into multiple images, dancing in Li Han's eyes, because he's continuously showcasing his professional skills with a fast and energetic pace. Li Han thinks to himself that he's getting too fired up. However, Li Han remains unfazed. The wooden sword in his hand appears and disappears with force that is both strong and precise, showing no signs of weakness. In fact, his steadiness even causes his opponent to feel a moment of panic, thinking to himself, what is this pressure? Li Han remains calm, looking straight ahead, without a hint of wavering or confusion. He turns while reminding himself to focus. Li Han must not be shaken. This is the moment to seize the opportunity and win. He recalls the earlier situation, quickly calculating his judgment based on his experience. He's been blinded by the unexpected situation, which has led him to make a lot of unnecessary moves. Most importantly, looking at the amount of mana on his sword, he realizes that his strength is almost depleted. Meanwhile, I'm not getting tired from using mana. Li Han concludes that now it's just a matter of time. The calmer Li Han becomes, the more Durugu loses his composure. His strikes begin to lack precision. His movements become erratic and panicked. He continuously feels flustered and confused inside, cursing himself, damn it, damn it, damn it. He grits his teeth, realizing his actions aren't making any significant impact or affecting his opponent at all. Wondering to himself, am I not putting in enough strength? He observes Li Han's calm demeanor, unable to understand why he isn't showing any signs of fatigue. He simply doesn't express his emotions. Li Han's absolute calmness and coldness, hiding his feelings, gradually makes Durugu feel helpless. He thinks to himself that it feels like he's throwing eggs against a rock. In reality, all of this is a well-thought-out plan by Li Han to make his opponent feel increasingly powerless. In truth, he has his opponent completely in the palm of his hand. Durugu seems to sense his own unfavorable and desperate situation, feeling extremely confused. Li Han tightens his lips, his gaze incredibly determined, exuding calmness and control over the situation. Seizing the opportunity, he lunges forward, swinging his sword powerfully at his opponent's weapon. It's a precise strike, and the wooden sword flies out of the other student's hand, landing several meters away with a thud on the ground, just as he's still in shock and flustered. Not knowing what to do, the remaining wooden sword is now pressed against his neck. That's Li Han's sword, showcasing his skill and talent. Durugu is still panting, unable to believe his eyes, perhaps still reeling from the intense moments just past. Li Han is also very tired, sweat streaming down his cheeks, but his gaze has never wavered, strong and full of spirit. Skillfully and adeptly reading the situation, seeing that the match has clearly determined a winner, the teacher steps forward and calls out for them to stop. The winner has been decided. He glances at both, who are exhausted and worn out. Reminding both to step forward, the teacher quickly glances at Durugu's face, which shows both frustration and a bit of unwillingness, clicking his tongue in regret. It's a pity. Both were evenly matched. If he had been calmer, the outcome might have been different. But he panicked when faced with the killing intent. The teacher thinks to himself that at such a young age, it's tough for him. He then shifts his gaze to the opposite side, where Li Han has made everyone look at him differently. Then the teacher approaches them friendly, saying that both of them performed very well today. First, winning or losing isn't everything. He continues to remind his students that winning shouldn't make them arrogant, and losing shouldn't make them discouraged. That's how they can progress. Now let's shake hands. Li Han watches his opponent, thinking to himself that based on his personality, he won't let this go easily. If he attacks me, it'll be... But surprisingly, before Li Han can finish his thought, a green hand reaches out in front of him. Durugu praises him in a humble and friendly tone. That was an amazing match. I truly apologize for my rudeness earlier. He continues, you really deserve that, leaving Li Han surprised and bewildered. I didn't know how to respond. You were still worried inside, but I realized you didn't seem like you were waiting for me to drop my guard and attack. I quickly extended my hand to shake hands with Durugu, politely, humbly replying, you're probably saying that out of concern. The teacher, seeing the positive attitude of the two of them, was pleased and clapped to show his approval, while the group of students in the distance still looked confused and disheartened. Seeing this, the teacher immediately turned around. He shot a disapproving glance and asked, "What are you all doing?" The others hesitated to clap, making the remaining students feel wary. Soon everyone joined in clapping in response to the teacher. Before long, the sky darkened the ominous colors, and a hint of mystery began to fill the academy's space, where a group of students stood together. They seemed to be secretly discussing some confidential issue. One student spoke up, Durugu, from the Choi family, identifying himself as a student of the White Tiger Tower. He crossed his arms over his chest and quietly asked, "Aren't you going to let that guy off the hook after being mocked like that?" "Right." Hearing her ask, that Durugu still maintained a polite and humble demeanor as he replied, "I lost because I'm still inexperienced." Upon hearing this, the surrounding students rushed in expressing their discontent, chiming in, "It's because he played dirty." "It's not your fault, Durugu," but he still openly admitted his weakness, saying, "It's because I'm still weak." It turned out the one who spoke earlier was Giselle. He sighed and lightly smiled, saying, "It's not important anymore." He continued speaking with a tone that was slightly arrogant, showing a sense of superiority. "What's important is that the honor and pride of our tower have been trampled by you." His voice was filled with reproachful intensity. "Take responsibility, Choi family. This is Durugu." He silently affirmed the position of the person in front of him, the Moradi family, the center of the knights, and tightened his grip, asking, "How do you want me to take responsibility?" He snapped his fingers and calmly said, "It's simple. If the quality is poor, just compensate with quantity." Immediately, two other students stepped up to stand shoulder to shoulder with Durugu, startling him. He used a tone of disbelief and dissatisfaction to say to Giselle, "As a knight, don't you feel ashamed?" In the midst of this, Giselle replied in a nonchalant tone, "That's just an excuse from the losers." Upon hearing this, a few people behind also showed a bit of awkwardness and helplessness. They whispered to each other, "I've never heard of this before. Why do we have to go this far?" Giselle smiled, but his eyes had no hint of laughter. Coldly, asking back, "It seems like some of you are a bit timid, huh? Why don't you just speak directly to me?" Hearing his somewhat threatening and arrogant tone, the students quickly turned away, avoiding eye contact. They didn't dare say anything more out of fear of his family's authority. No matter how uncomfortable they felt inside, they couldn't express it too openly. Just then, the situation was tense and strained. Durugu calmly and firmly spoke up, "I oppose this. I won't take revenge." Then turned and walked away. Seeing him oppose his opinion, Giselle waved his hand dismissively and even let out a mocking laugh at Durugu. "Ha! The coward has run away. Looks like I need to find someone to replace Durugu." At that moment, a big guy with a nose like a tomato and pointy ears like a witch excitedly pointed to himself, saying, "Give me a chance, Moradi." The students hearing this realized something fun was about to happen. Durugu also stopped quietly standing still to observe the next developments of this dirty plan. He silently worried for Lihan, thinking that even if he trusted Wadan's skills, 1 against 3 was still too much. Not to mention there were students of knights trained daily. He clenched his fist, telling himself he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. This wasn't how a knight should behave, no matter how much his decision would affect the future. Durugu resolved to stand on the side of justice, even if it was late at night. The atmosphere was eerily quiet. The bright moon illuminated a stretch of sky in a desolate area. A footprint quietly appeared on the ground, seemingly out of nowhere. It turned out to be Durugu's footprint. He was desperately running fast, panicked, and hurried, shouting, "Wadan!" Suddenly a strange object flew past his eyes, startling him, and he quickly dodged to the side. It turned out to be a stone that quietly rolled to his feet. However, what was even more astonishing was that the stone had hit one of the White Tiger Tower students earlier, causing him to fall face first to the ground. Lying unconscious, Durugu could only stare blankly, unable to speak. The others looked pale and shouted, "You bastard! How dare you!" A slender hand holding a magic wand and a familiar voice. Calm yet steady, it rang out. It turned out to be Li Han, who was using the wand to skillfully control magic, making the earth stones and leaves around him begin to move. Then Li Han warned in a slightly threatening tone, "If you want to die, then come closer." Seeing that scene, Durugu was also extremely horrified. He was sweating profusely, stunned, unable to utter a word. Everyone was in a state of panic, not understanding what was happening. What the hell is going on? It turns out everything started a while ago when a fierce voice rang out. He thought, "Do you think we'll let this slide after you win? We definitely won't. You can't attend any more classes." It turns out the students from the White Tiger Tower had proactively blocked Li Han's path surrounding him. They even brought weapons, large sticks. Li Han looked at the scene before him, feeling quite annoyed. They did this because of class. What a hassle. Just get lost already. He turned around to look at them, showing a dangerous demeanor, and said, "Do you know which clan I come from?" The others hearing this felt a bit shaken, but also irritated, snapping back. "That kind of threat is just cowardly. You think we're scared?" However, they still looked a bit hesitant, glancing at each other, but no one dared to step forward first. This made Li Han quickly assess the situation. Looking at them, it seemed someone was backing them up. He quickly sketched a portrait of a puppet master in his mind, thinking there must be a boss behind this. Who else could clean up this mess? Li Han sighed regretfully. After all, if they thought it through, they wouldn't have acted like this from the start. He loudly stated the truth, causing everyone to panic. Hey, are you guys doing this because someone from a big clan you can't refuse is behind this? One person hearing this tried to shout loudly to calm everyone down. Shut up, don't let him trick you. Surround him, don't let him escape. The others hearing this quickly moved to encircle Li Han in a circle, raising their sticks aggressively and angrily. Li Han realized his opponents outnumbered him and hesitated, thinking that 3 against 1 was a bit tight. He recalled what the teacher had explained back in the day. Aloran had told him that in situations like this, just run away. He said that running away was the best way to deal with multiple enemies, but if the escape route was blocked, how am I supposed to run now? He tried to think of the best plan for himself and suddenly noticed. Wait, Li Han noticed the relatively small stones at his feet and thought, if I had these, maybe I could. He quickly remembered the lesson on controlling the pen he had practiced the day before and compared the stones to that pen. These stones weren't too big, and their sizes weren't too different either. He thought, let's do this. Li Han pulled out his wand and chanted a spell to move. The stones immediately floated in the air. Seeing this scene, the students surrounding Li Han looked extremely stunned, exclaiming in confusion. He can use this kind of magic already. Could it be that the Wardenas clan is really different from us? Li Han felt joy and relief as he successfully controlled the stones and his confidence returned. He thought, thank goodness this worked. This should be enough to scare them off, right? Just keep going and then run. He continued to control the stones to fly higher and faster, threatening them to get lost. Otherwise, he pointed his wand in one direction and the stone, as if it had eyes, and could understand his words, flew straight with tremendous force. It hit a nearby student, causing him to immediately fall face first to the ground, knocked out in pain, making those around him genuinely frightened, sweat pouring down. But that wasn't Li Han's intention. He was sweating too, thinking to himself, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. I need to practice more. Meanwhile, the others began to get angry and yelled loudly, this bastard, how dare he? The tomato-nosed student who had volunteered to replace Durugu earlier said a bit fearfully to his companions, those stones are going to fly at us without any time to prepare. The other guy also replied, slightly scared, even if he's a wardeness who can wield such powerful magic. Meanwhile, Li Han stood firm, looking at them with determination. Though inside he was quite confused. He sighed, resigned, realizing this wasn't part of his plan, but he had to keep playing along. Li Han kept reminding himself to stay serious, maintaining a cold expression as he pointed directly at them, his voice dangerously calm. If you want to die, just charge at me, he said, unable to shake off the fear in his heart. In a hurry, he followed his fainted friend, leaving behind some annoying threats. You can't escape. Seeing the whole process, Durugu was just as puzzled, wondering what he had just witnessed. Li Han saw him and calmly asked, are you here to fight me too? He quickly denied it. No, it's just that it's midnight and the moon is shining beautifully with a bluish light spreading across the space. Li Han was surprised and asked again, is that guy Gaio trying to threaten us? It turned out that Durugu and Li Han were sitting together by a campfire. He was speechless because he couldn't remember his classmate's name and reminded him, it's not Giselle, is it? Oh, right, Giselle, he corrected himself. So he said that Li Han noted that the atmosphere in the White Tiger Tower was quite different. Everyone in my tower is friendly and close, Ganando had told him that. But Li Han quickly thought about how the White Tiger Tower had its own order. Just then, Durugu used a stick to sketch a portrait of GDC for Li Han to see, saying, he looks like this. Li Han saw it and wondered, who is this? He quickly remembered the guy who had talked to him at the beginning of the swordsmanship class the other day. Is it that guy from before? Li Han concluded, thinking he was a good person. His actions didn't match his appearance at all. This made Durugu, who was standing next to him, question, what does being mean to appearance? Li Han seemed not to hear what he said, still mumbling to himself. So he's playing his role. That's why he's famous. This made Durugu, who was behind him, give up. Hey, are you even listening? Li Han was still lost in his own thoughts and replied, besides, he's famous. Don't tell me you think Gigi is just an ordinary person. So that means he had a reason to approach me. Both of them sat down by the warm campfire again. Li Han noted that it was already strange that they came to fight him. Then he heard Durugu reply, there are a few reasons for that. First, you come from the Wardenas clan. If he defeats you, a person from a famous clan, especially a first-year student, Giselle will have much more influence. Li Han responded, so you're saying I'm a sacrifice for his power? That's really annoying. Durugu replied, I'm worried about that too. He's calculating that in the future you'll continue to show a positive attitude while the students in my tower will keep harboring hatred when they know how to exploit those emotions. He sincerely warned Li Han, if you continue to study swordsmanship, I want to remind you to be careful. It's already very late. The two stood up to return to their tower. Li Han recalled Durugu's advice. Try to avoid classes with students from the White Tiger Tower. Gigi won't be able to do anything. He pushed the door into the tower, thinking to himself, that was good advice. But I can't follow that. First, finding a good class is very hard based on my standards. Secondly, he confidently thought to himself, how dare they drag me into that political mess? This is a matter of honor. The next morning in the common room, students were gathered together when they suddenly heard someone calling. It turned out to be Li Han, who was hugging someone, his face full of wounds and his clothes dirty. I was just attacked by students from the White Tiger Tower just because I'm a member of the Azure Dragon Tower. He looked pained and distressed, thinking to himself, now how will they react? The students were stunned. What are those thick-headed guys crazy? They don't know who they're messing with. It was outrageous. Many classmates shouted loudly, and one friend stood up and shouted, this is not the time to mess around. We need to call everyone upstairs. They didn't dare provoke Gar. Nando, but how could he bump into someone as fierce as you? Hearing that, Ganando peeked his head down from the stairs, puzzled. Why me? He looked at everyone's reactions, thinking, oh, they seem more excited than I thought. He waved his hand to calm them down. Hold on, no need to make a fuss. While the others were about to rush in, someone shouted, where are the weapons? Hurry up and find them. Call everyone. We still owe you. Everyone here has eaten your meat. It's a whole different story. If it weren't for you, we would have starved to death by now. The cruel principal, upon hearing this, felt a pang of guilt and quickly waved his hands to calm everyone down. A friend swiftly took charge, directing everyone to form 2 lines, and everyone followed suit. They shouted loudly, let's go smash those White Tiger Tower guys. Li Han imagined a fierce battle about to unfold, feeling guilty for causing all this chaos. I had no idea that the Azure Dragon Tower hated the White Tiger Tower so much. Turns out the reason is that we always despise those who are most like us. Everyone was still rallying each other, using anything they could find as weapons, and off we went to the White Tiger Tower. Just then, someone shouted, wait! It was our son who addressed everyone before we left, saying, but we shouldn't act recklessly. The tower is meant for those from Knight families. If we charge in recklessly, we'll end up losing. Li Han thought to himself, just as expected, Asan was really rational and quickly advised everyone, that's right, everyone. But Asan interrupted. You will stay back and wait to attack. Upon hearing this, everyone cheered joyfully. Indeed, we trust you, Danka family. Everyone is ready. Let's go. Li Han, hearing this, broke into a cold sweat, feeling downcast, thinking how foolish he was to hope for something while trying to stop everyone. Wait, I don't want you all to seek revenge. This is a matter of my honor. So I'll handle this myself. I know it sounds like a friend interrupted you, but those guys are really cunning and frankly despicable. Those filthy bastards won't be easy to deal with. Li Han silently felt fear creeping in as she thought about it. He cursed them without taking a breath. He sighed heavily, then boldly exclaimed, we are the children of noble families. Isn't it shameful to act like them? Hearing this, everyone started to feel down, lost in thought. Li Han quietly felt relieved that Tuyet was okay now. Let's get to the point. You continued. But if they choose to fight us, we should stand together and respond. They will likely attack us in packs, like the cowards they are. Your classmates were incredibly excited to hear that. Their eyes sparkled with spirit. That's right. Wadanat, let's unite and get ready. Li Han finally felt a bit more at ease. I've managed to deal with the chaos among the families. People started to separate, but some were still worried, asking each other if the next class would be with those bastards. If so, then good, let's make them taste hardship.